The story begins with the introduction of the main character, a fan or transmigrant. The guy hiding crawled through the grass, again exposing himself to danger in an alien world. Originally looking for a quiet life, fate took an unexpected turn when a wandering cultivator turned him into ashes. The guy thought that he was already living his second life, and it was quite possible that he would again meet an unfortunate death. He was overwhelmed with a feeling of reluctance. Then when the boy was on the verge of life and death, a mysterious voice was heard. "Leader, exert your strength. The time has come for countless years of cultivation." A man appeared on the horizon, radiating a terrible, powerful, and evil energy. That day the boy saw them for the first time. 3 warrior girls. They were beautiful with their shining skin, long legs, and at the same time deadly. Corpse flames flew at them, but they did not stop and rushed forward, trying to warn each other from blows. Here 2 of them were struck almost simultaneously, and they fell to the ground. The surviving girl was terrified. A huge tongue of deadly mortal flame reached out to the girl and was already ready to destroy her. But having gathered all the anger and resentment for her sisters, the girl pulled herself together and found the strength to repel the attack. In her hands, she held cards radiating strong energy. A fierce battle continued in the sky. The guy watched the fight from the bushes. He was upset by the outcome because the girls were really pretty. Continuing to watch, he thought that he had not even had time to look enough, and his first love had ended very suddenly. The forest is being cut down, chips are flying, and he, as always, was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The boy thought that if Brother Da Fu didn't need these stupid herbs, he wouldn't be here. But now he has to hide and think about how to save his next life. The guy's name was Ye Fan. 3 years ago, he was working the night shift as a delivery man, but he got into a car accident and ended up here. Without boosts, without a standard system, he had neither talents nor skills to successfully practice. Therefore, it was difficult for him to defend himself from monsters and, in principle, survive. Then one of these monsters noticed Ye Fan and decided to attack. The guy had to dodge its blows. Yifan was taken in by a local doctor and followed him, learning the art of healing while trying not to starve to death. The doctor and Yifan had a good relationship. The doctor would joke that Yifan's hair looked like a weed, although this was completely inappropriate. But now the boy was dodging the monster's attacks. Other time travelers had managed to conquer unfathomable heights in the fight between good and evil with just one sword. Luck was always on their side. But Ye Fan was a weak time traveler. He dodged the spider and asked the monster to leave him alone. Continuing to run away from the monster, the boy jumped off the cliff and the huge spider fell, creating a large shock wave that pushed Ye Fan back even more. When the boy realized that he had fallen off the cliff, he became scared and realized that he was unlucky too often. Ye Fan fell into the ravine. The bright sky was visible from above. The boy did not understand where he was, but he was happy to realize that he had survived. Yifan fell onto a tree branch. He was hanging upside down, clinging to it, but suddenly he noticed an unusually rare flower. It was a mandala flower. A few of these would make an excellent medicine to suppress the poison in Brother Yifan's body. The guy took out a small, sharp tool and began to approach the flower to cut it. But then someone snuck up behind Yifan and quietly whispered in his ear, asking what made him smell so delicious. Yifan turned around abruptly to see who had said this. The voice was female, so he saw a beautiful girl behind him and was very surprised. She looked at him with a sly look and said that even though the guy had broken into her house, she forgave him. After all, he was so cute, and just looking at him made the girl happier. Yifan was embarrassed and replied that she was also very charming. He also thought that he didn't expect to run into a beautiful girl in such a hole. Then she stuck out her tongue, which was exactly like a snake's, and sweetly asked if the guy would like to become her snack. At that very moment, the girl turned into a terrible monster with sharp teeth, a snake tongue, and a toothy belly. In a sudden fright, Ye Fan took out his sharp little axe, which he had wanted to cut the flower with, and struck the monster's head with it. The blow was weak. The monster girl began to complain about it in a hurt voice, although the guy thought that he barely touched her with his weapon. The next moment, the girl raised her head, made an angry look, and said that even though she was not the strongest representative of her race, a pathetic little human could not defeat her. The monster pounced on Ye Fan and wanted to swallow him, but the boy was determined to fight. But before he could even swing, a powerful clot of energy appeared right in front of them. It looked very creepy and frightening. The force of the blow threw the guy aside. In his opinion, it looked like the apocalypse. A dark figure appeared in the sky, addressing a certain Chu Wu Shuang, saying that she would no longer hide. It was useless. In order to find this girl, the man released another cloud of energy, threatening to burn down the entire forest in order to find the girl. At this time, Ye Fan was falling, thinking that his end was coming. It was a shame. The end was pitiful in his opinion. The corpse flame, which the guy encounters not for the first time, has already burned the monster that tried to attack him. Tears began to fall from the boy's eyes. He was sorry that he had lost this chance for his life. Yifan closed his eyes and heard the system's voice, telling him that the master was in danger and therefore needed to be activated. The guy stood up and saw a huge glowing plasma in front of him. This surprised him very much. He looked at her with an ecstatic gaze and could not believe that, after 3 whole years, he had finally received his system. The system itself appeared from the plasma light in the form of a little girl. Calling Yefan the master, she said that she was his system administrator. The guy literally froze. The girl introduced herself and opened a spreadsheet with her master's parameters. It said that the guy was 16 years old, his lifespan was 1666, he was in the early stages of blood strengthening, and his cultivation was 999 billion years. The system said that the guy could use them, but there was one thing. But when Yefan saw these numbers, he no longer listened to the girl. He couldn't be mistaken. Such a large number of years of cultivation would give him enormous strength. It turns out that his power is now universal in scale, and he is invincible. He is in for continuous victories, dominance, and the ability to do whatever he wants. While the boy was already imagining in his dreams that if he wanted to, he could destroy the entire world with one blow, the system tried to tell him that if he used cultivation that exceeded his physical level, there might be side effects. But the guy didn't listen to the system. The girl realized that her advice was not interesting to her master, especially since he should know better. She said that the guy's idea was quite possible. As she disappeared, she said that she would wait to see it with her own eyes. Yefan was afraid that the system was disappearing, but he could not resist it. Then a strange sound was heard from above. The guy raised his head and saw that one of the sisters who had survived the battle was falling right on him. As she fell, she ran straight into the guy. Due to the height and speed of the girl's fall, the impact was too strong. The guy stood up and scratched the back of his head, gritting his teeth, and said that he was in a lot of pain just now. But when he opened his eyes, he was surprised to see a beautiful girl in front of him. He realized that she might be a goddess. Had the system already decided to give him a gift? Turning to the girl and putting his hands on her shoulders, he asked in fear if everything was okay with her since she had fallen on him. Looking up, the girl was surprised to see the guy, so she immediately said that if he didn't want to die, then he should listen to her and promise her something. Embarrassed, Yefan looked at the girl and thought to himself that they were all too straightforward at times. She picked up a small glowing piece of paper and said that it was her last teleportation talisman. She asked me to go to the city of Tiana and tell a certain gentleman about everything. But before she could finish speaking, her talisman exploded in her hand, surprising them both. Yefan and the girl were frightened. Then a voice echoed above them, calling Chu Wu Shan. It was the girl's name. Then the voice asked her if she didn't find it ridiculous to run away from him for 3 days. Looking at the dark silhouette, Yifan thought that this evil guy had used the skull flame that had almost killed him just now. The strange guy looked creepy. Dark energy was shining around him, and he was telling the girl that she would never escape from his hands. Here the energy became stronger and began to accumulate. The guy closed his eyes from the bright, obsessive light. This had happened to him more than once. The dark energy picked up the girl and began to lift her up. Chu Wuxian let out a soft cry from the pain that gripped her body. Then his gaze slid down and he again saw those same flowers he wanted to cut. The boy immediately remembered his brother. At this point, the realization dawns on him that even after all his efforts, they were once again in vain. Voices from his past life began to sound in his head, telling him that he was a pathetic loser. At this time, Chu Wuxian, trying to escape, addressed the guy as Shilong and said that her sister would never forgive him for this. Shilong laughed and told her that she was stupid to think that this vile girl would dare to oppose him. Extending his hand towards the girl, Shilong added with a laugh that no one would save her. At this moment, Yefan suddenly stood up, took his sword, and turned to Shilong, asking if he was the one who burned the forest. Boy was surprised. How could an ordinary mortal contradict him? Did this pathetic little bug really want to die? Yifan then replied that they would now see which one of them was the bug and started the system. At that moment, his energy instantly reached a tremendous power and gathered around him. Shan, who were watching, in shock. They could not believe that a mere mortal had so much strength. Looking at all this, the girl stepped back. This powerful energy seemed uncontrollable. Surprise and fear were frozen on her face. Shilong couldn't understand what kind of creepy aura was enveloping him. He screamed in fear and stuttered, "What is this guy doing?" As Yifan advanced on Shilong, he replied, "That wasn't he the one who called him a pathetic mortal bug? Did Shilong really think that he was better than everyone else and that he could do whatever he wanted?" Shilong stuttered again and told Yifan not to approach him because he had discovered the 3 sacred springs of life, the golden elixir. Therefore, he was now a stronghold that no one could destroy. Before Shilong could finish speaking about Yefan's pathetic and harmless hoe, the boy dealt him a crushing blow. Shilong screamed in agony that this was impossible, realizing that he was powerless against such energy. Yifan calmly and coolly replied that he had now thoroughly experienced the power of a mere mortal. Chu Wu Shan was amazed that this ordinary mortal was able to injure Shillong with one blow. Yifan stood bravely over Shillong, who was lying underneath him and could no longer even move. He just screamed that he was invincible and that it was impossible for anyone to do any damage to him. But Yifan wasn't going to listen to his whining and raised his blade one last time, swinging and shouting that his opponent was about to die. The blade struck the enemy amidst his loud cries of bewilderment. The blow was of enormous force and became the final and last one for Shillong. And the energy was so strong that it passed right through the enemy and made a huge crack in the opposite stone wall. With one last swing of his sword, Yifen calmed his energy and stood in front of the defeated strongest enemy in a warlike manner. Chu Wu Shan watched all this with undisguised delight. She was amazed by the enormous power of the guy's blade and his energy in general. Looking at his weapon, Yifen noticed that it was very strong. This was all the result of 999 billion years of training. It was too good to be true. But then a notification came from the system, warning the owner that he had used cultivation that went far beyond his physical body. Therefore, Yefan's lifespan was reduced by 44. Thus, the guy only had 6 years left to live. This news stunned Yefan. The system showed a board with the owner's parameters, which indeed showed that he had 6 years left and that it was necessary to increase his life expectancy and physical strength as soon as possible. Yewon was furious. He was surprised to see that he only had 6 years left to live, and he started yelling at the system. But the system just shrugged. She looked sweetly at her master and replied that she was trying to warn him. She told the boy that if he used more power than his body could handle, his lifespan would be shortened. Yifan clutched his head in despair. He was suddenly upset by the fact that if he died, the system would die with him. He asked the virtual girl what would happen to her after that. The system replied that its duty was to accept the fate of the host. If the host died, the system could still survive by choosing another fate. Life was like a white horse. The system laughed and added that it would accompany the host until the end of his life and disappeared. At this point, Yifan angrily shouted at her not to disappear. He felt hurt that she had set him up. But his angry cries were interrupted by Chu Wushan, who had already stood up and thanked the boy for saving his life, addressing him as an elder. Yifen was surprised by this. Did he really look that old? But now was not the time to think about it. First, he had to find a way to increase his lifespan. But the girl continued, saying that the dragon did not chase her for 3 days and nights to take the secret treasure that she now holds in her hands. But thanks to the guy's help, she is now standing here. So she decided to offer this treasure to Yufan as a token of her respect and her gratitude for saving him. But Yifan waved it off, saying that there was no need and she could keep it. Chu Wushuang was shocked by this answer. The secret treasure she had guarded her entire life, was that not enough for her savior? But Yefan walked up to her and grabbed her chin, saying that if she wanted to thank him, maybe she had some longevity pills. Chu Wushuang, embarrassed, replied that she had nothing like that. Yifan then turned away from her and said that everything was fine, asking her to leave as he wanted to be alone. Then the girl called out to the elder again and said that she still had some third-grade jade toad pills. They were good for healing. Maybe the guy needed them. Yifan was delighted and replied that it might be useful to him and took the bottle. The action then moves far into the gorge of Mount Delung. There was a small palace there from which a strong energy of red color emanated. It was directed and accumulated in large levitating clocks in the sky, which drew it in like a whirlpool. The monsters looking at them called this structure the Bell of Compassion. The light meant that something was wrong in the palace of the Emperor of Mercy. There was already some discussion going on in the palace itself. It seemed that the light from the Bell of Compassion was pointing to the Great Dragon Mountain, which was not far away. The master of the palace continued the thought of his subjects, saying that this glow meant that the palace of the Emperor of Mercy was hidden in Mount Tai Lung. At this time, in another place, one of Elder Shu's subordinates shouted that the legacy of the immortal emperor could not fall into the hands of another sect and ordered all the cult disciples to move out immediately. The next moment, the commander's subordinate was cut by a blade and fell dead. This was done by the formidable Elder Shai, who sat on the throne, and was outraged that his servant had started to say something while he himself had not even begun. Then the elder asked a certain Bai Kui a question, asking if they had reached the Great Dragon Mountain. Bai Kui, the guy in the black robe, answered positively, saying that the mountain was right in front of them. The elder added that the dragon's life tablet was broken and its soul was scattered in the mountain, and whoever did this to the dragon would pay for it. It was about the main character Shi Long who was killed. The elder in charge of him ordered everyone to go to Dragon Mountain. At this time, a quiet and peaceful morning had already arrived in Tianwu City. Yifan returned home, loudly greeting into the darkness. He was surprised that he did not immediately meet his brother Dafu. Then an ominous whisper came from the darkness, telling Yifan that he was here. Turning around, the boy saw a monster. More precisely, Dafu in the form of a monster. It was a terrifying sight. The monster approached the guy and asked him to satisfy his hunger. He growled, his mouth open with large fangs, and clearly did not realize what was happening. Someone rushed past Yifan at high speed, shouting at him to get out of the way. It was a man who had enough power to neutralize the monster. He looked powerful and strong, and bright blue energy was oozing from his eyes. Thanks to his strength, the man knocked over the monster with one blow, which sent him flying quite far away. Surprised by this, Kfan recognized the man as his Uncle Ba. He asked him what he was doing there. In response, Uncle Ba only shouted that Dafu was about to turn into a zombie, and the guy couldn't let his infected brother bite him. Dafu's mouth began to grow to a huge size, and then began to stretch towards Yifan, who froze in horror for a moment under the cries of his uncle, who was trying to warn him of the danger. But Yifan didn't wait long, but quickly got his bearings, and shouting for Dafu to wake up, threw a bottle of medicine at him. It exploded, sending up huge clouds of smoke that neutralized the cadaveric poison. When the smoke cleared, a distracted guy could be seen sitting on the floor, not understanding what was happening, and only remembering that he had been bitten by a zombie. Yifan told him that he had indeed been bitten, but fortunately he had found a jade toad pill, so Dafu did not have time to turn into a walking corpse. This story touched the boy very much. Dafu, with tears in his eyes full of gratitude, pounced on his brother with hugs, but he didn't like it. Yifan shouted at Dafu not to dare approach him naked and swung his leg. The blow landed right on Dafu's cheek, who had already taken a strong blow for the second time today and was thrown to the side. At this point, Yifan heard a notification sound. It was a system warning. It showed all Shu's parameters: Dafu, name, age, 17 years old, level, which was at the stage of foundation cultivation, and it was also written that Dafu is a proud person. Suddenly, the system's voice was heard from above. It said that it forgot to warn that this is an additional function of the system. While the cultivator is near the owner, the system will automatically scan and display information about it. Then the girl smiled mysteriously and said that this function could be turned off if desired. But Yifan did not understand why he should do this, because it was a wonderful skill. It was just needed to show him the level of cultivation. The guy looked at his uncle and saw his parameters too. Name, Shui Batian, age 42 years old, level, average stage of spiritual transformation. Yifan thought to himself that after seeing these parameters, he now knew that those whose parameters he saw were not ordinary people as he had previously thought. They were hiding well. But in the future, he would become the cultivation king of this world and gain enormous power. The system also liked this idea. After some time, there was a commotion in the city. Everyone was talking about Mrs. Yoongi, who had arrived at the Yi family's pharmacy. She was carried by her servants. Auntie Yoongi was popular. She was considered a good matchmaker, but everyone also knew that she was a slave trader. Yifan looked out from behind the pillar and didn't understand where this woman came from. But his brother sarcastically replied that Yifan was either not of this world or too tired, and that he had too picky taste to react like that. Auntie Yoongi told the boy that his old man asked her to find someone to take care of Yifan while he was away, and today a new batch arrived. Yugi asked to look carefully. There were many different girls in her cage, both normal and beastmen with ears and tails. They all looked scared and tired. You could choose anyone. But Yifan was immediately confused. He replied that he did not need a girlfriend and had no plans to get married or have children. But Auntie Yoongi asked him not to pretend to be serious in front of his mother-in-law. After all, she heard Yifan's father telling her that the boy had something provocative under his pillow. Dafu immediately began to mock his dissatisfied brother, who immediately began to deny these words. At this point, Yifan noticed something strange. His gaze fell on one spot and he headed toward the cage with the girls. They were scared, but Yifan couldn't believe that somewhere out there, he could sense that very girl. But yes, it was her. A little girl with blonde hair sat in the very corner, her head down. Then Yifan turned to her, and she immediately raised her interested green eyes to him. She was surprised that a guy like Yifan would pay attention to her. The guy extended his hand to greet her. He introduced himself and asked her name. Then he added that his pharmacy needed a handyman and asked if the girl would like to stay and become his gopher. The girl's hand reached through the bars and grabbed Yifan's sleeve. Then a sweet voice called out Zhang's name. Liner. Repeating her name more forcefully, the girl replied that she could do anything and began asking Kfan to take her away. The guy agreed. Looking at all this, Yoongi said that she heard that Lei said that Ye likes young girls, so it is true. Dafu thought about it because his brother said that he did not want it. but now he seems to be delighted with the acquisition. Laughing, Mrs. Yoongi suggested that Dafu and him find someone, for example, an unrivaled beauty like herself. But looking at Yoongi, whose appearance was, to put it mildly, scary, Dafu and Uncle Shuyi, who was standing next to him, answered in unison that they were not interested in girls. At this time, Yufan was rereading Zhong's parameters liner. He didn't just choose her. She is the daughter of heavenly destiny, born with a royal body and has a brilliant future. The guy is sure that he has found a treasure. At this time, a split mountain range in the Great Dragon Mountain erupted with bright light. It was at its foot that the yin beasts of the corpse cult were located and watching their leader. He in turn poured a red liquid into his mouth, which was the blood of the deceased stone dragon, the elder's only son. The rest of the cultists in black robes watched this and said that the bones of Elder Shudu's son had disappeared. All that was left was blood and ashes. After drinking the blood of his son, the elder used a special searching technique, a secret art, searching for bloodline. Then the energy in his hand began to glow and point in a certain direction. It was the city of Tianwu. The elder laughed and said that when he found his son's killer, he would show him what horror was. At this time in Tianwu City, Ye Fan's voice was calling his new maid, Ling Ling, affectionately. A girl dressed in a beautiful suit ran up and asked if Brother E wanted some tea. Sitting on the chair, Ye Fan thought to himself that if it weren't for the system, who would have thought that this innocent girl would turn out to be the reincarnation of the Empress? Yevon decided to start training the girl. He gave her a book about the Flying Immortal Sutra, which was given to him by his master, so the girl can try to learn from it. Lin Lin was embarrassed by the proposal and opened the book. She flipped through a couple of pages under the boy's gaze. Ye Fan also added that he has been practicing it for 3 years, so if she has any questions, she can ask them. But the guy didn't finish his thought because he suddenly noticed how the girl's parameters began to creep up. However, the girl hesitantly said that she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to learn it. But Ling Ling had already started to improve the blood strengthening stage, which from late to middle to early, and all this in a few seconds of reading, in the blink of an eye. Is this the difference between a genius and a mediocrity? This realization made Ye Fan upset. The girl asked what happened, but the guy replied that he couldn't bear it and needed a minute to come to his senses. At this time, clouds began to gather at the gates of Tianwu City. People thought that it was getting dark, but just now everything was clear. The clouds would not have covered the sky so quickly. Suddenly, one of the guards pointed to the sky and shouted that he saw something strange. In an instant, an explosion occurred in the sky, the wave of which covered quite a large distance. The last thing people managed to shout was, "Corpse fire," and then this fire instantly destroyed them with a shockwave. Seeing the outlines, the survivors guessed that these were the yin beasts of the earth level from the corpse cult. They came for revenge, and there were many of them. Elder Shutu shouted that he knew that his son's killer was hiding in the city. Today, she too was ready to destroy the entire city of Tianwu to honor the memory of his son. Yefen immediately received the news of the corpse cult's attack. He took it calmly and said that today, it seemed like he would have to lose a few more years of life, even though he only had 6 years left. And the ghouls had already penetrated the city walls and were grabbing people who were trying to run away and hide as quickly as possible. The elder only mocked and said that the entire city of Tianwu must now die for his son. The city was covered in darkness and an ominous aura. The members of the corpse cult destroyed everything in their path. At this time, it was still quiet and calm in Pharmacy E. Yi Fan guided his new ward Zhang Liner in her training. Yi Fan was thinking that the guy outside the city was really not that easy to deal with, while the girl sat on the bed and developed her skills. Yi Fan knew that even though he had a cultivation system, every time he used it, it would cost him his life. Therefore, he had to learn to control the size of his power. After all, one more thoughtless action, and he could really die. This thought brought fear to the boy. Then he decided to try techniques to strengthen his body. He strengthened his head, arms, legs, and everything else. But looking at himself, he did not notice that anything had changed much. Even the sensations remained the same. At this point, the roar outside the window made Ye Fan look at the city in the distance. The guy managed to break through the space with one grab outside Tianwu City. Then Ye Fan tried to pour energy into his eyes as well. All this was accompanied by a bright light of activated energy. It was amazing, but the guy was able to see even what was hundreds and thousands of miles away from him. The more energy the boy poured into his eyes, the further he could see. In this way, he would be able to see the world beyond the sky. It was amazing. Here Ye Fan noticed an interesting feature. This god's eye was able to see through objects. Looking at Zhang Liner, who was trying out new cultivation positions, was accidentally seen naked by a guy. Realizing that his abilities were truly amazing, Ye Fan was very happy and called them a weapon of prosperity. His reaction worried the girl. But Ye Fan hugged her and told her that everything was fine and that she shouldn't move now. The girl was afraid that she was doing something wrong while training. but she felt the energy of the guy who decided to try his vision on her once again. Jongliner said that it felt like something warm was flowing into her body. Yifan realized that the power was working by gradually sending energy into Ling's body through her veins. This could increase Ling's power faster. The energy filled the girl, and she began to scream with pleasure. Yifan asked her not to do this, because if the uncles and aunts in the neighborhood heard her, it would be bad. At this time, there was complete chaos at the city gates of Tianwu. People were running, trying to escape the oppression of the cult. The monsters grew more and more. They looked scary, covering the entire sky with their dark energy. Then a warrior appeared from the darkness, who ordered the defense of the city of Tianwu. He threatened to turn the monsters into ashes, lighting a fire with his hand. It was the head of the guard of the city of Tianwu, Pang Fei. Using his fiery energy, he created a huge burning bird, directed it at the crowd of enemies, and burned them to the ground. However, there were too many monsters, and the chief of the guard had to fly into the air. He joyfully and militantly exclaimed that they had succeeded in smashing the ghostly child. Pang Fei created a fire phoenix around himself. He introduced himself and said that he didn't know who came to Tianwu City from the corpse cult. But why are they destroying the city? Elder Shutu was outraged that some weakling was ordering him to stop. This was simply ridiculous. Then Pang Fei replied that he did not know how his state had offended his cult, but Master Chu was not yet in Tianwu City, so they would have to wait for his return. But the elder replied that he would most likely never see him again. It was all because of that stupid Chu Wu. Yeah. This news stunned the commander. He apparently understood what was being discussed, or he didn't expect to hear anything like that at all. Then he felt a sharp pain from behind. The elder's blade pierced him through and through. Pang Fei only wheezed that it was very mean, and now the owner would not let them go. But Elder Shutu was furious and wouldn't listen to him. So he killed the commander. His next move would be to destroy the entire city of Tianwu to the ground. Seeing this, Ye Fan realized that the corpse cult leader really wanted revenge. The girl next to him didn't understand what was going on. Ye Fan told her that now was her decisive moment. He ordered her to clear her mind and concentrate. Liner agreed. Of course, they can't let Shurtu do whatever he wants, so right now they'll find out how much power he can take from Ye Fan. Shitu looked up and saw the sky being cut open. This was the power of the mighty warrior who had killed his son. It was impressive. A huge hand came out of the sky and started to descend on the elder. Shutu was surprised by such power. Could this person really break through the void? It was scary. But Shutu introduced himself as an elder of the corpse cult and said that even if the owner of such power practices the void, it does not give him the right to insult the corpse cult, so he will regret it. Shutu proposed to negotiate, but Yifan, who was sitting far away from the battlefield, only laughed at such a proposal that expressed the enemy's fear and showed him an obscene sign through his huge hand, clearly indicating disagreement. Then, having shut the elder up, the boy took it with his huge hand. It looked both ridiculous and powerful. But Shitu was not going to give up. He could not humiliate himself, the god of transformation. He would fight to the last using the spell Devour the Dead. But Yefan didn't even feel his blow. If this is all Shutu can do, then the boy is truly disappointed with his strength. It's better for the elder to turn into ashes than to lose like this. With his fingers clenched, Yefan's energy was able to crush Shutu without even straining himself. He didn't care what level the elder was. He would still be stronger than anyone who stood in his way. Then out of nowhere, the system appeared and gave Ye Fan a strong slap on the back of the head for using power beyond his capabilities. This means the guy's life expectancy was reduced by another 5 years. Smiling and expressing its regrets, the system said that its owner had only 1 year left to live. Ye Fan was furious. 5 years was too long. He had already tried to restrain his strength. Then the girl explained that the system made the boy a scanning skill, a divine eye skill, and a purification skill for the little girl. That's already a lot. And you also need to consider tearing space with bare hands, crushing cultists, and all this really takes away the guy's vitality. After all the actions were really difficult. Yifan couldn't stop getting angry, calling the system a liar and a cheat. He couldn't believe that he had spent so much power. Tears came to the girl's eyes. After all, every time the choice of power is the choice of the owner, not the system. So she was offended and did not want to talk to the guy anymore. Yifan was surprised at how cleverly the blame for everything was shifted onto him. It left him in a stupor, even though the system was right. Zhongling asked what happened to the guy and what he was thinking about. Yifan remained silent in response, but in fact, he was thinking about it. He was trying to figure out why he was going to die soon. He knew he needed to find a longevity potion as soon as possible. He decided to do this in a special pill shop, Wanbao Pavilion. It looked large and beautiful. A strange man sat at the entrance and tried to create a protective spell for the pavilion. He had a card in his hands glowing with light energy, which he wanted to put into it to protect the building. When he finished, he concluded that at the moment, no one would be able to enter or exit from here for 2 hours. But Yifan, who was passing by, easily passed the barrier that had been created. Apparently, it had not even started working, which disappointed the man. He didn't understand how a mortal could pass through the barrier without his aura fluctuating. This guy must be special. Here, the system sent a notification to the guy that there was a dangerous cultivator near him. Enraged, Yifan ordered the system to turn off the automatic scanning function. After all, this scanning system can also shorten Yifan's life. After asking the system about this, it replied that it was true, but it was a useful plug-in given by the system. It took away a little bit of the guy's life, and he still didn't like it. But Yifan insisted on turning off this function because it was too expensive for him to spend his life in the background like this. All this indignation made the man looking at him look puzzled. The guy looked like a madman talking to himself. The man thought that it might be because he hadn't fully scanned the space or had made a mistake. That was most likely the case. Wanbao Pavilion was quite calm, but its scale amazed Yifan. He remembered that he had 1 year left to live. So in this place, he must find something that can prolong his life. If this does not happen, then the next time he is in danger, the situation will be dire. Here a beautiful girl appeared before him. The owner of the Wanbao Pavilion, or 10,000 Treasures, or as she is also called, the Blooming Sakura Wang Hong. She introduced herself and offered the guy her help. Yifan noted to himself that the girl was insanely beautiful. He asked her if there was a way to increase lifespan, for example, some longevity pills or elixirs. Wang Hong casually replied that immortal cultivation techniques were very valuable and rare, and they were not sold here. This disappointed Yifan, and he asked, was there really nothing at all? The girl replied that there might be something. Tapping her smoking pipe on a small bottle, there were 3 longevity pills in it. Wang Hong looked at the guy slyly and said that she didn't know if he really needed them. Yifan answered positively and stared at the pill bottle as if hypnotized, then asked how much it would cost. Hong thought to herself that she really wasn't wrong about the guy. He was a mortal who hadn't even received basic training. The girl said that the longevity pills were very valuable, each one costing 1,000 lower-grade spirit stones. Hearing the price, Yifan chuckled and replied that it was not that expensive. But he thought to himself, this is terribly expensive. A mansion in the center of Wushu City costs only 20 or 10 low-grade spirit stones. Well, plus or minus a stone, Yifan was already thinking about how to get out of this situation. Suddenly, a dubious idea came to his mind. He raised his head and proposed to Master Wang to make a deal with him. Wang Hong asked what it could be. She couldn't even imagine what this mortal could offer her. Yifan then said that he was willing to exchange 3 longevity pills for the protector of Wanbao Pavilion in his person. The girl immediately laughed. It was really funny and useless. She believed that no one would dare to go against the court of 10,000 treasures. Then from somewhere, another laugh, more malicious, was heard. The owners of the voices introduced themselves as a wall of black wind and ordered all the fools from the Wanbao Pavilion to give them all their stones, pills, weapons, and secret techniques. Strange and aggressively minded men emerged from the dust, and apparently at that very moment, they wanted to rob the pavilion. The guards immediately stood before them and asked who they all were to burst in here and make a fool of themselves. But the enemies turned out to be much stronger than they seemed. They attacked the guards and began an unequal fight. The gang leader ordered to kill everyone and leave no one. The pavilion descended into chaos. But Wang Hong was calm and only said, how dare they rob the treasure pavilion when they only had a foundation formation stage 3 level? In response, the robber only laughed and told the girl to stop pretending. They already knew that the 2 elders guarding the pavilion had gone to the Dragon Mountain to look for a chance to find the inheritance of the immortal emperor. So now she was the only one here. 3 men said at the same time that they would kill her, since there were clearly more of them. Wild excitement and self-satisfaction were visible in their eyes. Wang Hong realized that the robbers had been planning this for a long time. But did they really think that she couldn't hunt animals? The girl's gaze became aggressive, and the smoke from her smoking pipe enveloped her. One of the robbers realized that this was not ordinary smoke, but did not have time to warn his comrades. Wang Hong, having started counting, kicked him in the head with all her might. The guy flew back several meters. The next moment, she quietly and quickly crept up to the second robber and struck him from behind. The second opponent was already neutralized. She wanted to use the same tactics on the third man, but he looked too self-confident. She kicked him and was surprised when she felt no reaction to the blow. Moreover, the man with her foot on his face said that she was greatly underestimating him and grinned predatorily. He pressed the girl to himself with all his strength so that she could no longer move. Wang Hong tried to break free, but all in vain. She was stuck with her leg up in the air, trapped in the grip of a strong robber, and couldn't do anything. The robber noted that the girl smelled delicious and was also very gentle, which he certainly did not expect. Wang Hong realized that things were very bad. The two robbers, who had already recovered, told their third partner, Song Dao, not to forget that the boss had ordered them to kill everyone and leave no evidence. To which Song Dao replied that he remembered everything, but he would deal with the girl himself and very quickly. Yi Fan, who had been observing the situation all this time, suddenly spoke up, asking the pavilion mistress if she remembered the deal he had proposed, namely 3 longevity pills in exchange for him protecting Wanbao Pavilion, and then asked if Wang Hong would agree to these conditions. Turning her head, the girl who was trapped in a vice replied that if the guy could protect her, she would give him 300 different pills, not to mention the 3 longevity pills. Then Ye Fan took the pills as an advance payment, but did not accept them. The system happily declared that it was time to cut the enemies into cabbage. Ye Fan thought with fear that he only had 1 year left to live, and then he would die. But the system consoled the boy, saying that 1 year was more than enough to deal with these weaklings. But Ye Fan did not believe the insidious system and thought that it was encouraging him to use his abilities again, which could cause the boy to die. Ye Fan then confidently told her to use her little finger or her hair or even spit at the robbers until they choked. The man holding Wang Hong just laughed. He thought it was funny that the guy was sending a girl in his place to fight them. He commanded his fellow ghost Doc Yan to take care of Ye Fan. Doc Yan replied that he could handle the guy without any problem and attacked him from behind. He wanted to turn the boy, who he considered a liar, into a corpse by throwing the bandages he was wrapped in into him. They seemed to pierce through Ye Fan, enveloping his entire body, but the boy didn't even move. In the end, Ye Fan was already like a mummy when the gang leader told Wang Hong that she had lost her last hope because the guy had already been torn to pieces. But the girl was already in despair. She was not upset by this news and even said slightly offended that Ye Fan deserved it. But then the guy's wrapped body began to glow. Light energy began to ooze through the bandages. The next moment, Ye Fan tore the bandages around himself and they flew in all directions. The guy then said that he had figured out how to deal with the villains. For this, he decided to use Master Wang's pipe. At this time, Doc Yan was already flying towards him, intending to attack him again. He was surprised that the guy was able to break free, but this fact did not stop him, and he decided to use the demonic bonds again. But Ye Fan was already prepared to parry the blow. He didn't want to be wrapped in bandages again. Did their owner even know how prickly they were? Probably not. Ye Fan ran towards the enemy and threw Madame Wang Hong's pipe at him with tremendous force. The pipe flew through 2 opponents at once with such force that it ended up breaking through the wooden shutters. Ye Fan scratched his head thoughtfully, realizing that he had used too much force again. The girl, who was still being held hostage by the third robber, was dumbfounded that an ordinary mortal could take out 2 mid-level masters with 1 blow. The robber was also confused and very angry. He ordered Ye Fan not to come any closer, otherwise he would crush the girl's head with 1 hand. But the guy was already unstoppable. Did this fool really think he could threaten him in his position? Ye Fan thought this was very naive, and while the robber was perplexed, the guy was accumulating energy around himself. The next second, he fired a huge beam of energy straight at the man, not missing by an inch and not hitting Wang Hong. A shrill cry of pain came from the robber's mouth, which he certainly did not expect to feel. Looking at him with a gaze full of anger and confidence, Ye Fan said that the person who insulted him should know what it was like to live with pain and die from it. Then unexpectedly for everyone except the guy, the pipe that had flown outside the house returned like a boomerang and flew straight into the robber with the same enormous speed. The tube got stuck in the man's neck, causing him to choke. He was no longer interested in Wang Hong, who was lying next to him, shocked by what she had seen. These were the last seconds of the robber's life. Ye Fan pulled the tube toward himself, which had previously passed through the man's body and exited through his chest. He let out a shrill scream and fell to the floor unconscious. Ye Fan thanked him for returning the pipe to him. After all, it belonged to Master Wang, so the robber couldn't have kept it for himself or in himself. The battle ended here. Ye Fan looked at his parameters. The system gave out the text. Master has killed 3 low-level cultivators. 2 months of your life will be deducted. Ye Fan was glad that it didn't take him long to deal with these guys, and even relaxed. But the system was upset. She realized that with such a quantity of life, she would not be able to use her power already this month. But Ye Fan, squeezing her cheeks, assured her that he would control his strength and begin to train his body. Therefore, this little girl would not get rid of him quickly. The system said, offended, that her face was swollen because of the guy, so it was still unclear what would happen next. At this moment, Wang Hong's voice rang out. Kneeling down, she said words of gratitude for saving her and protecting the pavilion. She also held 12 longevity pills in her hands, which she handed over to Ye Fan. Taking them, Ye Fan thought that these pills, even all at once, would only give him 3 years of life, so he had to find another way. Then he asked the girl if they had other ways to prolong life. The system decided to answer him. It said that ordinary cultivators practice Taoist and immortal arts to improve their body and soul. Many body improvement techniques have long been lost, so there are no such techniques in the 10,000 Treasures Pavilion. However, Wang Hong intervened in the conversation and said that if necessary, the pavilion would do everything possible to find life-extending techniques for Ye Fan. Wang Hong understood that this senior's strength was unfathomable, so it would be good to gain his favor, but it still wouldn't produce any technique. Then a strong beam of energy suddenly and unexpectedly hit the girl right in the stomach, and she flew back several meters, losing her balance. A terrifying figure appeared out of nowhere, which indicated that the guy opposite had no shortage of courage, since he dared to kill Brother Son of the Black Wind. The figure took the form of a very powerful man who shouted that he would take revenge on the boy with blood. The warrior came from the Black Wind village, Sun Du, and had an early stage of transformation. After recovering, Wang Hong stuttered and said that it was Song. Du, he poured part of the soul into the body of Sun Dao, so that in case of death his avatar would appear. Ye Fan was instantly angry. He didn't understand what kind of nonsense this was. It looked like stupid cheating, but the guy didn't think long, dodging the enemy's blows. But at that moment he came to his senses and asked the system how much life he needed to deal with this enemy. The system responded that it would take 2 to 6 months. It'll be as it happens. But if nothing is done, the enemy will attack again. A Sundu didn't have to ask or wait for long. He was already preparing for the next aggressive strike. Ye Fan didn't know what to do or whether to use his life reserve, as it might not be enough. Plus, his body was also using his lifetime to recover. But there was no time to think. Sundu rushed straight at the guy and directed a powerful beam of energy at him, screaming that he would soon die. There were only a few seconds left before the expected strike. Ye Fan had to think very quickly. He replied to Sun Du, who would not accept his blow in exchange for life. He did not want to endure this pain. So, taking all 12 pills and throwing them in his mouth, the guy shouted that it was Sun Du made him do it. Now let him take care of himself, the fool. After all, the longevity pills all at once are the end for him. But for Sun Du, Ye Fan seemed like a small worm. He was amused by the boy's resistance. After all, the avatar was ready to tear him apart. But after Ye Fan ate the pills, he realized that the years of life he had gained were enough to use high-level techniques, and he began to concentrate the energy in his hands. The energy began to accumulate at a tremendous speed and reached a huge scale. It shone throughout the pavilion and instantly destroyed the enemy. Ye Fan realized that he had instantly become stronger, but at the same time he could already control his outgoing power. After completing the technique, the system gave Ye Fan new parameters. The boy's lifespan, extended by the pills, was currently 2 years and 3 months. Wanbao Pavilion looked like it was in ruins. It would take a long time to clean up and restore everything. Wang Hong turned to Master Ye as she decided to call him. The boy turned around, looking serious and stately. Then Wang Hong voiced her request. She asked Ye Fan to cleanse her body. The request caused slight bewilderment on the guy's face. He asked why he should help her. With a change in expression, Wang Hong sadly replied that although the guy didn't know, she was originally a direct descendant of the Wang family from the main store of Wanbao Pavilion. But it so happened that the girl became a victim of intrigue and was sent to this place. As a result, her cultivation level decreased again and again. Thus, she became an outcast in Wanbao Pavilion. Continuing, Wang Hong said that if the guy was willing to help her, then she would help him get the pavilion's main treasure, which was life-extending. At this point, Ye Fan was already thinking. His gaze became interested. After waiting and thinking for a while, he did not answer. Ye Fan turned around and walked in the other direction. Wang Hong exclaimed in confusion, "Does he really not want to get what he wants?" But before she could finish speaking, Ye Fan turned around and asked if the girl really wanted to do it right here. Wang Hong's eyes lit up, and she agreed with the guy and followed him. Having overtaken him, the girl pointed to the room and told him to go there, since there was definitely a place there. Entering the room, one could notice that it was very large, spacious, and surprisingly, still cozy. Entering the room, Wang Hong asked the boy what she needed to do now. Should she prepare elixirs, treasures, or formations? But Ye Fan replied that he did not need to go through all that trouble to refine. Ye Fan pointed to the bed and only told the girl to go and lie down on it. Wang Hong was very confused. She didn't expect this. She replied that it was not right for her to lie down. But Ye Fan did not understand her confusion and asked if they would cleanse or continue to stand and fidget. Then the girl decided to agree and do as Ye Fan said. At this time, something strange was happening in the Black Dragon Village. The clouds hanging over the large house reflected the mood of its owner. Coughing up blood, Sundu wondered who this guy was that could destroy his soul. He looked like a child. It just couldn't be. But if this guy can crush him as easily as he crushes an ant, then the question arises, what to do with him? Song's subordinates appeared from the shadows. He told the owner that he had such a face as if he had met a stern enemy. The owner answered positively, saying that was true, and now it was unclear what to do. The servant then asked, had the master forgotten about their treasure that had cursed the 72 members of the Gong family? This evil artifact killed 72 members of the Zhong family one by one, and they didn't even understand how. Even the trueborn cannot escape its effects. These words inspired Sundu. He said that this silly girl Wang Hongming would still be in his power. The leader, in high spirits, announced and ordered everyone to prepare human sacrifices. The subordinates of their master began to run away and grab people from the nearby village. There was real chaos there. There was no mercy for anyone. At this time, Ye Fan was performing a purification ritual on Wang Hong. A bright light was oozing out from her body, symbolizing that everything was going well. But the girl still decided to check if everything was okay. Ye Fan replied that it might hurt a little now, so he would have to endure it. Yifan commanded the billion-year cultivation system to activate. A plasma glowing screen with a code immediately appeared in front of him. Wang Hong immediately screamed very loudly. Just as Yifan had warned, the procedure was unpleasant. She felt a huge amount of energy boiling in her body. It was both painful and pleasant at the same time. After finishing, Yifan rubbed his forehead with cancer and asked how Miss Hong felt after such a procedure. The girl stood up and replied that everything was fine. Then she became embarrassed, realizing that she had made too much noise in front of the elder, and she felt ashamed. How could the guy ask her anything at all if she couldn't even say a word right now? After testing her strength, Wang Hong was very surprised that the poison that had accumulated for so many years had completely dissipated. Thus, she regained her flawless spiritual body. The girl thought to herself that this guy had done something with just one movement of his hand that even a rank 9 creation pill couldn't do. It was amazing. The girl suddenly knelt down and bowed, sincerely thanking Ye Fan for his kindness and pure spirit. But the guy replied that he didn't want gratitude, he just kept his promise. And now that the poison was no longer in her system, it was time to fulfill his part of the deal. Having said goodbye, the guy left. But as soon as he turned around, his expression changed. This stupid system that prevents him from being cool in front of the girl started ringing in his head. Turning to the girl, Ye Fan asked her what was going on. The system looked sad. Turning to the owner, she said with tears in her eyes that he was a fool. He was dying, and at the same time he was trying to pick up girls. This news surprised Ye Fan. He didn't understand the system's words. Why is he dying now? Then the girl pointed to the board and said that some idiot was stealing her precious life points. The owner was cursed. The tablet said that the boy had only 610 days to live instead of the expected 730. The curse level was average. Yi Fan didn't understand what was happening. Song spoke of Du was in the center, levitating and sucking the life energy out of the human victims he brought. The girl screamed and asked for help, but Sun Du did not spare them. The victims were horrified by what was happening, but could do nothing. Looking at all this, Sun Du reveled in this spectacle, anticipating the end of the brat who had humiliated him. At this time, the system was indignant at its master. It called him a fool, saying that the boy was cursed by the boar he had defeated. As a mortal, Ye Fan would have been killed instantly, but the system saved his life. But their enemy still continues to steal the chosen fate of the system. The girl was so angry that she was ready to kill him herself. Yifan then asked how long he had left to live. The system replied that this curse accelerated life by 100 times, so if the guy had 2 years left to live, he would only live for a week. This shocked Ye Fan. Living for only a week was definitely not enough for him. He felt fear and anxiety, asking the system about it again. She confirmed her words and said in a tragic voice that the guy would die in a week. But together they must figure out how to lift the curse, because now the system and its owner are on the same side. The next second, Yifan was thrown into the real world. This happened at the worst possible time, namely, at the moment when Wang Hong was changing clothes. The guy felt awkward. He silently blamed the system, which in its stupidity did not even look where it had thrown him. Confused, Wang Hong asked the master what he was doing here, but he put his hand on her shoulder trying to calm her down. He turned to Wang Hongming, telling her that if she had news about the longevity medicine, she should go straight to the Jukang pharmacy in the south of the city and find it. In the meantime, the guy had important things to do, and it was time for him to go. The girl looked at Yefan with a serious look and told him not to worry as she would find the medicine for him. Then after saying that he would go first, Yifan released the energy he wanted to use for teleportation. Wang Hong looked at the master with admiration and was determined to help him. At this time, terrible things continued to happen in the Black Dragon village. Many people gave up their life force to prolong and strengthen the curse placed on Yefan. Sun Du sat on his small throne and watched what was happening. The followers of his cult stood around him, protecting the leader. The victims screamed that they did not want to die, but Sun Du just laughed mockingly at the little people. He thought that he was lucky that the spiritual body left a mark on that person's soul, making everything go smoothly. And now it doesn't matter whether he is immortal or a reincarnated god. The curse will overtake him. And if it does overtake anyone it is sent upon, then only one thing awaits him: death. Then from the darkness, a bright energy began to emerge, and Ye Fan's voice was heard, asking if death was really waiting for him. The next second, the energy accumulating artifact was broken by a single squeeze of the guy's hand. Continuing his thought, Ye Fan added that if Song Du thinks about death, which means he has already definitely thought about his fate. Sun Du was dumbfounded by what he saw. He didn't understand how Ye Fan knew about the Immortal Era artifact and even broke it. It seemed impossible. But Ye Fan didn't listen to his opponent for long. Calling him too noisy, he began to accumulate energy around himself. The system in his mind at that time said that at that moment, the guy had spent half of his life in one breath. Looking at Ye Fan seriously, the system asked in a worried voice, was he confident that he could handle it? Ye Fan replied that he was more worried about this fool dying a horrible death than about his own lifespan. The system responded with interest that it was ready to help the guy. They were partners after all. Without answering, but understanding each other, Ye Fan began to act together with the system, combining their forces. Their combined energy was strong enough to create a very powerful attack. The partners looked strong and confident. Their energy created huge hands reaching out to their opponents. Song Du shouted that this was impossible because Ye Fan was cursed. But he didn't have time to say anything else, as he was struck by a powerful energy and thrown back to the cliff by a shock wave. Sun Du managed to grab onto the edge of the cliff as his last chance to survive, and even harbored hope that he would be able to get out. But Ye Fan broke the stone support and grabbed the enemy, throwing him up with great force. Song Du only had time to scream loudly in fear. After this maneuver, Ye Fan raised his hand up and indifferently shouted, "Let's fly!" In a few seconds, the guy's enemy was already beyond the Earth's orbit in real space. After Sun Du was actually sent into space by the strong impact, turned into dust, and disappeared forever. Standing on the ruins left by the battle, Ye Fan celebrated a small victory inside himself. He had proven that he would not die, but those who wished him dead would. But his joy was interrupted by the system. It said that the master was rejoicing too soon, since his lifespan was still decreasing due to the curse. Ye Fan was surprised. He had destroyed the knife, which was an artifact. Then why did his life continue to decrease? The system pointed at the boy's chest in horror and said that it was too late. The curse was already on him, and it could not be destroyed. Looking at himself, the boy saw a strange mark on his chest. It was the curse mark. It scared him. The first thought that came to Ye Fan's mind at that moment was that he asked himself why he was always so unlucky. At this time in the city of Tianwu, right in front of the pharmacy, there was a terrible commotion. A huge monster appeared from somewhere. People ran in different directions, shouting that the monster was right on the street and hid in their houses. The monster was indeed quite large and made loud, scary noises that sounded very unfriendly. Ye Fan was walking down the street, completely broken and lost in his thoughts. He was thinking about his life. After all, if the system's calculations were correct, then he had only 3 days left to live. And the guy didn't understand what to do now. Returning home, Ye Fan shouted to let everyone know that he was back. Sitting in front of him was Ling Ling, who didn't even notice his return at first because she was busy. Raising his head, the boy shouted, warning Liner of the danger, and rushed towards the girl. But on closer inspection, he realized that the huge polar bear sitting opposite her did not seem to pose a threat to the girl. They were just playing nicely. Lin Lin stroked the bear's head after handing him some boards, apparently needed for the household, and smiled. Turning her head, the girl finally noticed her brother Ye Fan. She was glad that he had returned. Ling Ling, forgetting about the beast for a moment, rushed towards the frightened guy and began to hug him. The whole situation seemed extremely strange. Ye Fan looked behind the beast, not understanding what it was doing here, especially next to a little girl. Then Ling Ling introduced the bear as Xiao Manhwa. He responded by waving his huge paw at Ye Fan with satisfaction. Then the girl began an explanatory story about how Xiao Manhwa was her childhood friend and they were very close. But one day, the Black Wind clan attacked Zhong Fortress. Her mother and father were killed, and the girl herself was taken prisoner. So Xiao Manhwa and Ling Ling were separated from each other during a big fire. Shedding tears while telling this sad story, the girl added that she would someday take revenge for her past. Ye Fan then comfortingly placed his hand on her head and told her not to worry about it, because the Black Dragon village no longer existed, and the people who had harmed the girl had already disappeared. Raising her head and looking at the boy with surprised eyes, Ling Ling asked if it was true. Did that horrible village really no longer exist? Ye Fan then replied in a relaxed manner that the villagers had done too many bad things, so he killed them all. Therefore, Ling Ling doesn't have to worry anymore. From now on, she is Ye Fan's family, and no one can hurt her anymore. Turning to Brother Fan, the girl gave him a grateful look. She burst into tears and thanked him sincerely. Even the bear did not remain on the sidelines and was touched when he heard such words. The pleased girl stepped back and asked if Fan was hungry and offered to cook him something to eat. The girl, without waiting for an answer, ran into the kitchen, leaving Fan and Manhwa alone. The system immediately activated in the guy's mind and told him that he was speaking suspiciously calmly, despite the fact that he only had 3 days left to live. Fan immediately sank down. He understood everything, but he didn't know what he could do in such a short time. Where to find longevity pills? Hearing the boy's concerns, the bear made a strange growling sound, as if he wanted to draw attention to himself and say something. The beast stretched out its paw and opened it, wanting to give Fan those same pills. Apparently, it realized that the guy was a good person and wanted to help him. Seeing the contents in Xiao's paw Minghua, the boy exclaimed happily, realizing that these were the pills of eternal life made from the Ming fruit. Huanga. Even if it is damaged, it can still increase the life expectancy of the person who uses it by 5 years. Running towards his chest where his things were kept, Fan simultaneously shouted that Manhwa would now go with him to get the medicinal fruit. After finding a huge backpack and putting it on, Fan added that just in case it would be better to take a large bag to collect a lot of fruits at once. Grabbing the bewildered bear by the scruff of the neck and dragging him along, Fan shouted at Ling Ling one last time not to wait for him for dinner, as he would not be coming. At this time in the mountains, where peace and quiet reigned, a joyful event, so to speak, happened. Sister Wuxuan returned home. Lifted by the airflow, she landed gracefully on a hard surface. The townspeople immediately began to whisper excitedly. They liked Sister Wuxuan and were glad that she had returned. But the girl was too serious to share the joy of her return. She confidently entered the large room, opening the equally large doors. These were her sister's chambers, who upon Wuxuan's entrance, lay calmly on her bed greeting her. Turning to the girl, the sister asked how she was doing in her training, from which she had just returned. Wuxuan got straight to the point, saying that she had gone to Great Dragon Mountain to complete her training, but had accidentally ended up in the Imperial Palace and obtained the Sword of Compassion. Lifting it up in her right hand with her energy, Wuxuan showed off her trophy to her sister. She was very shocked. These emotions were revealed by the surprised look she gave her sister. Taking the sword from Wuxuan, the sister said that she should go after her now. With one movement of her hand, the sister created a portal and transported herself and Wuxuan to another place that looked like a forest. The girls found themselves in a bamboo forest. The sister said that this was a very important matter and asked Wuxuan to tell them about everything in as much detail as possible. Then the sister replied that after she received the sword, she was pursued by a stone dragon from the corpse cult, and she even prepared to die because she could not escape from the monster. But suddenly an unknown master appeared and saved her. After saving her, he did not want to take the sword of compassion from the girl, but only wanted to get the technique of continuing life. The sister interrupted Wuxuan, asking, "Did a mortal really not want to take the great emperor's weapon, which countless people wanted to obtain, as a thank you?" Wuxuan replied that he was not deceiving her. The power of this mysterious man was incomprehensible, by the way. It was he who split the Dragon Valley, and the girl, remembering, added that the guy also said that when he found an object that prolongs life, he would go to the city of Tianwu. The second sister thought to herself that she was in charge of Tianwu City, and it was strange that she didn't know that there was such a strong person there. Then she told Wuxuan to first hide the sword of compassion and continue training. And the case itself is quite unusual, and it is not yet clear what happened. Turning around, the sister said that she needed to report this information to their sect leader. Wuxuan only nodded in agreement. Here the girl fell. It happened suddenly and unexpectedly. The sister ran to Wuxuan and asked what happened. The girl was emitting dark energy. This could only mean that she seemed to be cursed. The sister noticed a tattoo on Wuxuan's body from the corpse cult that took the girl's life. But a poison tattoo can only be removed by a poisoner. Now Wuxuan's life was in real danger, and something had to be done. At this time, in the Wanbao Pavilion, Wang Hong was listening to another report from her subordinate that in the pharmacy, which the girl herself asked him to check, there was nothing special that would help prolong life. War Hong said that she didn't know that such a great person had been hiding in Tianwu City for 3 years, but if he hadn't shown himself, she would have thought that he was an ordinary doctor. Then the pendant on the girl's neck lit up. This meant that she had received a message. The girl pulled out a small gold card straight from the green stone on her pendant. After reading the contents, Wang Hong was slightly angry, as her subordinates had gone AWOL without her consent. This was very reckless. Have they forgotten who is in charge here? But her subordinate immediately turned to his master and said that they were going there for 1,000-year-old ginseng. This news instantly removed the anger from the girl's face, leaving only surprise and interest. Then her subordinate continued the story. The 1,000-year-old ginseng disappeared from the seal of the imperial palace and became the cause of rivalry between several princes and is now hidden in the mountain of the great dragon. Continuing his thought, the girl said that this was the very life-extending item that Master Ye Fan had asked her to find for him. Even if it meant taking a risk, she would do it. Then a small hamster jumped out from a pile of gold coins behind the girl. His name was Yuan Bao. He could help the girl with her mission. The little animal immediately climbed onto Wang Hong's hand, playfully biting her finger. It was already ready for the upcoming journey. Having placed the hamster on her shoulder, Wang Hong walked out of the pavilion to the respectful bows of her subordinates. At this time, heavy sighs were heard from the thicket in the forest. It was Ye Fan and Xiao, Manhwa. The guy lay there, barely breathing, just like the bear. All because they both filled their bellies with magic berries and were lying contentedly under the trees. The food was very tasty, but they physically could not fit more into themselves. Looking at his statistics, the guy was glad that he was able to increase his life expectancy to a year in this way. Unfortunately, the boy had the last magic fruit in his hands, but he was so full that he couldn't eat it anymore and just held it in his hand. But apparently not firmly enough, because some strange little animal snatched the fruit from Yefan's hand and carried it away, accompanied by his disgruntled cries. Yefan immediately chased after the little hamster, shouting for it to immediately return the fruit to him. Here, stopping and looking at the sky, the guy noticed that the weather had suddenly changed dramatically. He wondered if the sky was just overcast or if there was a reason for it. Then Yefan saw the same hamster that had stolen the fruit from him, but this time the little animal was running towards him and holding some kind of decoration in its teeth. Seeing it closer and taking it in his hand, Yefan immediately realized that this was Wang Hongming's necklace, and the animal was only thus attracting his attention and calling for help. And not in vain. The girl was fighting an unequal battle. The blades seemed to meet every second. Turning to the elder, Wang Hongming asked if he was still willing to kill her for treasures, even though he knew what family she was from, to which the man replied that he was already an outcast, so it made no difference to him how and whom he killed. The elder's last blow seriously injured the girl, and she, unable to withstand it and losing her balance, fell and rolled on the ground. The man then towered over her, saying that although this brat was a member of the Wang clan, she was not powerful enough to be the mistress of the treasury. Therefore, once he got the ginseng, he would think of how to give the girl a proper burial. But putting his hand to Wang Hong's neck, the elder was surprised and made a disappointed and questioning sound. And then he asked where the girl's necklace was. After all, that was where he had started all this for. Hong chuckled and replied with all her might that the man would never be able to take her treasures away from her. Enraged, the elder raised his huge sword over her and was about to hit the girl with it and kill her. But in the blink of an eye, first a strange flash appeared, and then an equally incomprehensible sound was heard, alarming the local birds. Yefan appeared in front of the girl, using his magic to reflect the blow of the man who was about to kill the girl he already knew. The guy was not only able to stop the opponent's blow, but also use force against him. Therefore, the man was thrown back by a large shockwave. Standing up, Wang Hong looked at the master who had saved her with enthusiasm and joy. Handing the girl her hamster, Yefan said that thanks to this treasure-hunting animal, he had made it in time. The guy thought to himself that he shouldn't reveal all the funny details so as not to spoil the effect. Walking up to Ye Fan, Wang Hong handed him something glowing in her hands and said that this was what the boy asked for. Looking at the girl with gratitude, Ye Fan said that she had done an excellent job. Taking the root vegetable from her, the guy turned around and added that Wang Hong should now watch how he would deal with this pathetic man. But out of the corner of his eye, the guy suddenly noticed a beam of light approaching him at great speed. This was enough to have time to jump aside together with Varhong. A figure of a man appeared in the sky, indignant at the behavior of these two little worms who dared to act so arrogantly in front of the Jindang masters. Turning to Ye Fan, Wang Hong warned him that both of their opponents were at the Jindang level and he needed to be careful. Having assessed the situation, the guy, realizing that there were two opponents, asked Wang Hongming if she wanted to take revenge. The girl looked at him in surprise. After all, she was only at the late stage of forming a foundation, and these guys might be too tough for her. But reaching out his hand to the girl's forehead, Yofan said that it was okay and shared his energy with Wang Hong. The girl immediately felt a surge of energy and that her cultivation level had increased dramatically. In an instant, she realized that she was already at the peak of Jindan. A large whip appeared in her hand as a weapon. Their enemy was already rushing towards the boys at great speed, shouting loudly about their death. But Yefan and Wang Hongming already felt confident and calm enough with each other to repel the attack with their small team. The man who fired the beam at the boys pounced on them, asking a rhetorical question: are they looking for death? Wang Hong and Ye Fan's cold-blooded gazes said one thing: they would have no trouble dealing with the enemy. They gathered their strength and hit the man on the jaw from both sides. The blows were strong enough to make the enemy feel their power. The offended man who sank to the ground cursed and said that even his father had never beaten him like that. But the two friends were already looking down on him and making mocking jokes, like a little boy who had been kicked in the ass by his elders. The man recognized Master Ye and began to beg him for mercy. But the guys just threw him aside in front of the so-called elder, who no longer knew whether to defend his comrade. His indignation reached its limit. He called the heroes little upstarts and clenched his fist in anger. He rushed at the boys, gathered energy in his hands, and told them to try to dodge it. But suddenly he fell to his knees, sliding them along the ground. His trick was called a bow roll. The man fell at the feet of both boys, bowing to them. And then grabbing Yefan's legs and calling him Big Brother, he asked him to spare him because he had worked and shed blood for the Wanbao Pavilion, and now he would not dare to do it again. Yifan looked at the girl indifferently and asked, was this old man always like this? Maybe they should let him go, but he left this choice to Wang Hongming. She began to think. And she replied that since this elder had done so much for the pavilion, if he continued to serve her and Mr. Ye with all his heart, then she would spare the man's life. Still bowing to the floor, the elder agreed to all these conditions. The heroes turned around and left without saying goodbye, and the elder thought to himself that it seemed the pavilion had a new owner in the person of Master Yi. At some point along the way, when the boys had already moved far enough away from the battlefield, Wang Hong quietly called out to Master Yi. He stopped and turned around, asking her if she had said something or if he had misheard it. Awkwardly raising her head, the girl began to thank Yifan shyly for saving her again. She also added that she was supposed to help him find a life-extending item, but in the end, she needed the boy's strength again. Tears started to flow from her eyes. She bit her lip to keep from crying, but it didn't help. The girl felt ashamed of such circumstances. She said that she understood that her fighting skills were mediocre, but before she could finish speaking, Yifan put his hand on her shoulder and began to console her. The guy said that he had power, but not even a fraction of the knowledge that the girl had. So in the future, he would have to rely on her. Therefore, Wang Hong definitely shouldn't belittle herself. The girl stopped crying and was inspired by Yifan's fame. But then the guy disappeared in the blink of an eye, and the system's voice was heard in his head. It said that this was all, of course, very touching, but it seemed that the guy had forgotten something. The next second, Yifan saw the evil system pointing its scythe at him, but the boy himself was angry. The system kicked him out of the real world again when he was trying to be nice and ruined everything. Then the system evilly, cunningly asked whether the guy wanted to live, because he continued to do the same thing over and over again. The guy looked at the already evil system with an arrogant look and asked what he was doing. The system realized that there was no point in talking to the owner, and having answered nothing, decided to throw him back into the world of people. At the end, she shouted that they would see each other later, and the guy was already flying down to the ground. The last thing he managed to shout before falling was angry words about the system, saying that it was a deceiver and that it needed to leave this manga. After Master Ye had already fallen, he looked down and saw Wang Hong right below him, looking at him with a confused look. And then she awkwardly asked Yifan if he could get off her. Looking at the girl's embarrassed face, Yifan immediately began to justify himself, saying that he didn't want this. This stupid system threw him directly into another person. Wang Hong was silently grateful to the guy because he did not despise her because of her low cultivation level and even saved her in a difficult moment. Strange romantic thoughts crept into the girl's head. Suddenly she shuddered as if coming to her senses and looked at Master Ye with a slightly detached look. And then she simply told him that they would see each other later and simply left, waving goodbye. This behavior seemed strange to the guy, and the girl Wang Hong didn't understand what she was thinking about. She definitely shouldn't think about guys right now. At this time, the city of Tianwu was in full swing. Happy citizens were running around everywhere. They carried building materials and talked about Lord Chu, who had returned and organized monks to help them repair the walls, which would have taken a long time if not for his help. There were rumors among the people that it was Lord Chu who had defeated their main enemy. Some believed it, while others denied it, saying that the Lord was good with the sword, but not with spiritual power. A strange man in a dark robe listened to all this. After hearing all this, he assumed that it was the old man living in the city, but he didn't expect that this old fool Shirtu would fall in this city. Tianwu City has become like a nail in the coffin of the corpse cult, so they have to get rid of it. Here the strange man from the corpse cult felt the very strong light energy he needed. He turned around and saw her. Little Liner, who was running around the city on her business. At this moment, she asked the merchant aunt how much her fish cost. Looking at the girl, the cult member realized that this was indeed the body of a flawless spirit. He never thought he would be so lucky. This little girl can be used to make pills. With her help, it will most likely be possible to make a perfect medicine. At this time, Lin Ding was running through the city, humming a song, and heading home with the groceries she had bought. Stopping in front of the pharmacy, she glanced at the entrance and was very surprised. The door to the room was open, but the girl clearly remembered closing it before leaving. Something was wrong. Liner was scared, thinking that there might be a thief in the pharmacy. Her knees began to shake, but there was nothing she could do. The girl quietly entered the room and asked in a frightened voice if there was anyone there. Trembling with fear, she saw a strange silhouette from the darkness with glowing eyes. She was so afraid she couldn't move. But then a familiar voice rang out. It was Ye Fan's voice, smiling as he told the girl that he had finally returned. Running up to the guy, Liner admitted with relief that he had scared her a lot, as she thought that a burglar had broken into the house. Ye Fan hugged the girl and began to console her, telling her that everything was fine and that she was a coward. But when Liner bumped her head into Ye Fan, the boy's eyes lit up red. He still kept repeating words of comfort and repeating that he was back, so everything was fine. What does she have to be afraid of now? But the guy's gaze instantly became greedy, cunning, and cruel, but the girl did not notice it. After some time, the fake Ye Fan led Liner outside Tianwu City and headed towards the forest. Liner followed him obediently, but over time she began to realize that something was wrong and decided to ask a question. She asked her brother Fanya what he wanted to show her. What was so far from the city? The boy replied that it was a fruit of the spirit that he had hidden and asked her to wait and walk with him a little longer. The girl frowned. She immediately shouted out that Brother Fan doesn't act or talk like that. She challenged him and asked who the guy pretending to be Ye Fan was. Liner's gaze froze as she continued to look at the guy changing before her eyes. He looked at the girl, asking her again if she really didn't know who he was. The guy's gaze changed. The next second, his face changed, and two new eyes appeared on it. He extended his hand to the girl and said that he was her brother Xiao Fan, although it was already obvious to her that this was not so. The pretender's joyful cry echoed throughout the forest. He was pleased that he would take this pure spirit for himself. At this time, the real Ye Fan reached home and joyfully shouted that he had finally returned. But no one was there to greet him. The doors were open, and the boy quickly ran inside. Anxiety was already creeping up on him when he saw Xiao Manhwa. The bear lay unconscious and did not understand anything. This made Ye Fan angry. Behind the beast lay a woman. It was Auntie Zhu. Ye Fan immediately realized that soul-stealing had been used on her. It was unthinkable. Ye Fan's teeth were bared in anger, and he began to fill with enormous energy. He couldn't understand how some fool could do this to his loved ones. Using his power of creation, the boy could look into any corner of the earth. Thus he began Liner. Casting his gaze into one of the caves in the forest, Ye Fan exclaimed happily when he finally found a girl there. He saw her hanging helplessly by her arms on chains, chained to the stone wall of the cave. And opposite her stood a man in a black robe. Ye Fan instantly recognized him. He was clearly from the corpse cult. And this cult was bothering Ye Fan again. This couldn't help but anger the guy. Sensing Ye Fan's presence, the cult member turned to look at the entrance of the cave, but did not notice anything, only thinking that he felt the emission of powerful energy. But the guy didn't pay attention to this and turned to Liner, saying that he would make a precious elixir out of this girl, then he would be able to cleanse her brain and bones. At that moment, Liner woke up. She didn't immediately understand what was happening. But when she saw the guy in the robe in front of her, she immediately remembered everything and said that no matter who he was, Brother Xiaofan would not let him go. But the guy ironically replied that a mere mortal would not help her. Turning to the cages with the other victims, the cult member told the girl not to even think about running away, as such a powerful cultivator could not hide from him. Grabbing one of the girls in the cage by the hand, the guy added that they were the medicine that would make him become God. The girls in the cages were crying and were very afraid of the guy in the robe, even though he calmly advised them not to do it. After all, to become part of the future God is an infinite honor for them. But the girls apparently did not share the delight of the evil fanatic. At this moment, Liner shouted at the cult member that he was still nothing in front of her little brother Fan. The boy mimicked the girl and furiously attacked her under the pretext that she had angered him with her talkativeness. Liner received a strong blow to the stomach, causing blood to come out of her mouth. It was very painful, and the guy in the robe aggressively responded that he wanted to see what her vaunted brother was capable of. Lowering her head, Liner wondered where Ye Fan was now. She had been waiting for him for a long time as she couldn't hold on any longer. The next moment, the enemy pointed his hand at the defenseless girl and began to use his special technique. Having transformed into a creepy monster with a lot of eyes, the guy decided to start using the blood purification technique. But before he could even touch the girl, a bright light began to shine right behind her, right behind Linner. It was him, the image of Ye Fan that was created by the girl's energy. The monster was surprised to see the legendary boy. This was the man who killed Shi Tu and Shi Long, and now this warrior came for his sacrifice. But it was just an image. The monster thought that it was okay. After all, Ye Fan didn't know that he was the one who stole the girl. But then a new image materialized from the other side and asked, does the monster really think that way? This time it was really Ye Fan. The monster jumped in fear. He didn't expect to be found, and so quickly. Ye Fan's gaze was enough to make the monster stunned and scared. After all, the guy was now a real legend in the corpse cult. The shaking monster said in fear that if Ye Fan let him go, he would give this poor girl to the guy and pointed at Linner. Raising her head, the girl who had come to her senses saw Fan's brother and wearily asked if he was really here. Ye Fan smiled kindly at the girl and said that everything was fine now. He would finish soon and they would eat together when they got home. With a forced smile, Linner approved of the idea and said that she would wait for it. The next moment, Ye Fan, with his raging energy, headed towards the monster. The guy was not satisfied with his conditions. He was thirsty for revenge. Ye Fan shouted at the monster to kneel down. The monster immediately fell down and began to make excuses, saying that he didn't know that the girl was one of his subordinates and begged for forgiveness. Ye Fan became even more angry and asked threateningly, did the monster really think that it dared to threaten him just because it had his people? Ye Fan clenched his fist and sent a bolt of energy towards the monster. An energy vortex formed around it and began to engulf it. The monster shouted, what the hell is this guy doing? But the funnel continued to absorb the monster piece by piece. He began to disappear from the space of this world. Eventually, the funnel formed a ring in place of the monster, which no longer existed in this world. The next moment, the chains that the girl was hanging on broke, releasing her wrists. Falling right into Ye Fan's arms, she immediately closed her eyes. The guy told her to rest for a while, hugging her tenderly. There was a flicker behind the guy. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the outlines of a system appear in the air. Putting Liner down on the ground, the boy recoiled when he saw the system again. He liked its sudden appearances. The system, armed with a scythe, approached the guy and angrily shouted, is it necessary for him to always dramatize every situation like this? Ye Fan began to physically close himself off from her verbal attacks on him. He shouted that he would never forgive the system for its antics. But noticing that the system had stopped attacking, the guy opened his eyes and looked at her through the pollen on his hand. And then he asked, was it really that easy to defeat this enemy? Was there really no bug in the system? But the system asked him, what's wrong? Everything is fine. Life was not reduced after using force. The system's calm behavior surprised the guy, but nothing could be done. It didn't answer. 2 days later, a significant event took place in Tianwu City. The door opened, or rather, flew out from some guy's foot. He flew into the room with shouts of greeting and walked forward joyfully. It was Ye Fan's acquaintance, the commander of Tianwu City. Together, after some time, they went to the city lord's mansion, which was surprising to Ye Fan's friend. But the guy replied that the city lord still does not come to their pharmacy and does not send others. Approaching the entrance, the friends noticed that their way was blocked by stone guards, crossing their dreams in front of the gate. Then the guy who introduced himself as Lin Lei held up a shining invitation and said that he, as the city's commander-in-chief, had come along with the pharmacist Ye Fan to meet with the city lord. Commander Lei was greeted and allowed into the huge hall with the pharmacist, where all the doctors and masters of the immortal sect had gathered. Tugged at Lei's cloak and said, a little frightened, that it was not his status to come here. Lei was surprised and smiled, saying that the last time he was seriously injured, Ye Fan used a special herb to bring him back to life. Lei still remembered this and thought of Ye Fan as a special healer. Then Ye Fan added that Lord Shu was a good man, and he remembered how he got here. Lei came running to him, and the boy wondered what he was doing there, since he was supposed to be serving in the city lord's residence. But Lei was inspired and told the boy to look at the note he brought. Lei added that they had a serious situation, and the Lord ordered to gather all possible healers. After reading the advertisement, Ye Fan realized that it was a recruitment order from the city lord. He was looking for a doctor who could cure the doctor's sister. Lei said that Ye Fan was the best herbalist he knew, so he decided to offer him a try. If Ye Fan could save the Lord's sister, he would become a great benefactor to the Lord, and a good fate would await him. But Ye Fan stopped his friend's enthusiastic flow of words, saying that there was no point in him becoming rich and popular. Besides, if they wanted to find the best doctor in Tianwu, they should go to one of the doctors in the immortal sect. But that was none of his business. But Lei added that in order to cure his sister, the city lord was willing to give secret manuscripts, pills, and elixirs that prolong life as payment for the treatment. Lei asked the guy to think again, because a couple of manuscripts from doctors and alchemists would definitely not be superfluous. But the boy didn't even have time to finish speaking. Pills, elixirs, and manuscripts were already spinning in Yefan's head. This was his chance to prolong his life. He immediately ran out of the pharmacy, shouting for Lei to keep up, and enthusiastically headed towards the Lord's house. This reaction of his friend surprised Lei. He did not know what the guy was thinking, and his behavior was even slightly suspicious. Once there, the boy saw a girl come out of the chambers and call for Dr. Lee to come in and examine the patient. This was Dr. Dai from 100 Herb Valley. He was the best in his valley, and if he couldn't cure Lord Chu's sister, then everyone else should just pack up and go home. Yifan watched the doctor warily, wondering if he would be able to cure this girl. During the time that the doctor was in the patient's chambers, only one stick of incense burned. Coming out of the chambers, the doctor bowed and left. His appearance was not encouraging. Lei pounced on Dr. Lee and asked if even he could not cure the girl. The doctor only sighed heavily and replied that the Lord's sister's illness was not an ordinary poison, but a mixture of witchcraft, poison, and curses, so even he could not help her. Then the voice of a girl was heard calling Dr. E to the sick girl's chambers. Yifan walked calmly inside and looked around. The scene before him was ambiguous. In front of him stood a beautiful girl with a worried look, who was talking to a little boy sitting on a chair. Yifan noticed that Master Chu's face was very familiar to him, but he had definitely never seen this girl before. This seemed strange to him. The boy sat on a chair and, strangely enough, smiled, looking at the Dr. E who entered. The girl approached Yifan and introduced herself as the Lord of Tianmu City. The boy also introduced himself as the local pharmacist. Looking at Madame Chu again, Yifan once again noticed that the girl, for some reason, seemed very familiar to him. Here the boy jumped off the chair with a joyful whistle. He had cute animal ears. The boy began to rush around the guy and say that even the young monk does not panic at the sight of them. The guy has excellent self-control, and it is admirable. Madame Chu introduced the boy as the head of the Heavenly Moon Palace Pavilion, Mauer Chi. He is also her older brother, and he is here to help cure her sister's strange illness. Pointing to the bed, the lady said that her sister Wu Xuan was lying there. The guy saw her and was horrified. The girl was in a terrible state, shrouded in negative energy. Ms. Chu said that after returning from the Great Dragon Mountain, she suddenly fell ill and has not recovered yet. Ye Fan recognized Wu Xuan. He had helped her before, but he didn't know that she had been suffering from a strange illness since they separated that day. He assumed that it was related to the corpse cult, which immediately made him aggressive. Then Mrs. Chu asked Mr. Ye if he could cure her. The guy concentrated and decided to get to work. First, he decided to check the meridians of the sick Mrs. Chu. He placed 2 of his fingers on her wrist. Then the door opened, and some guy suddenly walked into the room. A bright aura emanated from him. The guy was richly dressed and looked very neat and rich. He smiled, holding a fan in his hand, and walked into the room. But then the boy grimaced strangely and said with annoyance that this annoying boy had come to them again. Then Sister Chu asked the guy, calling him Mr. Jin, what brought him here. He replied that he had rushed over immediately when he learned that Wu Xuan was injured. Now he decided to ask how she was feeling. The atmosphere immediately became gloomy and slightly tense. Mrs. Chu explained that immediately after her return, her sister lost consciousness, and then the magical tattoo spread from her heart, gradually deepening over time, and the girl stopped waking up. But Mr. Jin didn't even listen to the girl to the end, and noticing a guy next to his sick sister, asked who he was. Mrs. Chu looked at the guy and replied that he was the invited doctor, Mr. Ye Fan. Mr. Jin walked up to the doctor and said with anger in his voice that Lord Chu was very worried about her sister, so it was only logical that she would seek medical help. But how could a mortal doctor who had such a low cultivation level be able to cure Wu Xuan? But Ye Fan ignored his chatter. He looked at the girl, wondering what could be the reason for her illness. He concluded that consciousness Wu Xuan is now trapped in a mass of negative blood qi, absorbing her life force. That was the crux of the matter. It all looked very strange, and was most likely the work of the corpse cult. The guy wasn't sure he could help Wu Xuan, but it was worth a try. But Yefan didn't have time to do anything because Mr. Jin's dissatisfied voice came from behind, who was outraged that the doctor was taking too long to examine Wu Xuan, since he didn't belong here at all. Yifan then stood up and told Mrs. Chu that he had found the cause of her sister's illness. It was worse than he thought. Therefore, he was not sure if there was a cure for it. Mr. Jin immediately became angry and said that a mere mortal would not be able to find the cause of this illness. Pointing his finger at the boy, Mr. Jin told him not to make a fool of himself and to just leave. But Yefan calmly replied that since this guy was so confident in himself, why didn't he try to find the reason himself? Then Mr. Jin ran up to Wuxuan and, replying that he would do it without any problem since he knew what he was doing, took hold of her hand. At first, everything was fine, but then a strange energy seemed to transfer to the guy. He screamed in fear, spitting out black liquid from his mouth that had formed as a result of his body's resistance to the disease. He didn't understand what had happened to him, but something strange began to happen to Wuxuan, which greatly frightened Sister Chu and the boy. The girl began to scream and throw herself around the bed, as if she was experiencing hellish pain. The next moment she vomited blood. She continued to scream and moan helplessly, clutching the sheets. Seeing all this, Mr. Jing began to ask in fear what was happening and why the girl felt so bad. The boy thought to himself that he was only probing the sea of Chu Wuxuan consciousness with his true key. He didn't understand why she reacted so strongly. Turning towards the smirking Yafan, Jin even began to suspect him of what happened. Jin folded his fan noisily and again attacked the guy standing next to him. He began to accuse Yafan of being the reason Miss Chu was getting worse because of his interference. But Yafan did not even flinch in the face of his accusations. He began to calmly explain to Mr. Jin that he had just used his true qi to penetrate Miss Chu's sea of consciousness. It collided with the poison in her body. That's why she vomited blood. Her body did not allow foreign energy to penetrate. Miss Chu's illness can only be cured by identifying the essence of the poison. Yafan turned to Madame Chu and asked if she trusted him. The guy was going to cure Wuxuan. The girl replied that now her sister's life was in the hands of Mr. E. He was their only chance to save her sister. Master Jin was outraged by Master Chu's words and actions, but she didn't care. She was in despair. Then the boy turned to Elder Mao and said almost hysterically, "How could one allow a loser who sheds blood to approach Wuxuan?" But the boy did not react to his behavior. He just looked up and told Master Jin to open his eyes and take a closer look. Was already preparing for the healing at this time. He concentrated strong energy in his hands. Looking at this, Master Jin was taken aback. He was surprised to see such pure energy. It seemed impossible. Elder Mao was also surprised and encouraged. He realized that Yefan was simply very skillful in pretending to be a simpleton. Wuxuan had told her about it was Yefan. The healer continued to collect energy and direct it into the body of the sick girl. With each second, his strength increased. Finally, there was a powerful explosion of light energy. Its rays rushed upward and broke through the roofs. The light was visible even outside the house. It was seeping from everywhere. No one present had ever seen such power. After the energy subsided, one could see Wu Shuwan's calm face, who had stopped convulsing and was frozen on the bed. But the next moment she opened her eyes. Her gaze was calm and peaceful. In front of her, she saw her beloved sister, Elder Mao, and, what surprised her the most, Master Ye. Sister Chu knelt down in front of Ye Fan and thanked him for saving her sister. Now she owes a lot to the doctor. Wuxuan, who had sat up on the bed, also thanked Master Ye for saving her again. Ye Fan simply waved it off and said that it wasn't worth thanking. He was just doing a small favor. Jumping on the boy, Elder Mao jokingly called him a funny guy. This embarrassed Ye Fan. Mao immediately offered the boy to join the Palace of the Heavenly Moon. He can give the boy a whole mountain. But Yafan again waved it off, much to Elder Mao's chagrin, and replied that he was quite wild and preferred freedom. And the guy thought to himself that he didn't see the point in giving him a whole mountain. Unless the elder wanted him to work for him, that was ridiculous. His employer had to be at least of the divine level. Looking at Ye Fan's attention, Master Jin clenched the fan in his hand in anger. He had never heard of such a young master in Tianwu City, and thought that perhaps he was just using pills to temporarily hang his level. Jin was angry that he, as Wuxuan's childhood best friend, couldn't help the girl, and that woman Chu Wu Yue trusted some stranger more than him. This made the guy very angry, but he knew that this was not the end. He then decided to start by pretending to apologize to Master Yu. He said that he was blind and did not see the true power of the doctor. He also added that in the future, his sister Jin would be happy to cooperate with him. At this point, Mr. Jin decided to leave them, turning around under the suspicious and unpleasant glances of the others, and began to walk away. Yifan thought to himself that Jin was too arrogant to let things go like that. It seemed like they would meet again in the future, and then something bad would happen. But Mrs. Chu interrupted his thoughts, saying that Wuxuan needed rest now and suggested that he leave her to rest. A reward was offered for the help provided. Yifan remembered this and thought that once he obtained the longevity pill, he would be able to use all his strength and not care about his lifespan. So they walked into the treasure pavilion of the city lord's mansion, which was strewn with jewels. This legendary treasury looked too rich, much more impressive and cool than Yafan had heard about it. Madame Chu said that this place was not as good as the Heavenly Moon Palace, but there were many worthy rewards here too. Elder Mao confirmed this and added that if Yifan had time, he could take the boy to the Heavenly Moon Palace to have a look around, as there were even more treasures there. Yifan was excited, but after thinking it over, he told Elder Mao that he would gladly accept the invitation. But the corpse cult had offended his protege and provoked him more than once, so the guy had to resolve this issue first. He then turned to Lady Chu and said that Wuxuan had most likely also suffered from the corpse cult, so they should be more careful with him. Master Chu replied that the corpse cult was indeed a great danger, and now that the emperor's palace had been attacked, the girl was afraid that these lands might be covered by a bloody storm again. Hearing this, Yifan became tense and asked Lady Chu to enlighten him and tell him more about the imperial palace. Lady Chu agreed and began to tell the story. The immortal emperor, Nian Tianfeng, had become the closest to becoming a god in the Hichzhou region in millions of years. In ancient times, the world of immortals was divided into 9 continents, each of which was guarded by 9 immortals who fought with the abyss of the underworld to seal the demons at the bottom of the underworld. People thought that the immortal would live forever in peace with the immortals, but one day they all died. It is said that the emperor's palace is the tomb of the immortals, which not only holds countless treasures, but also seals their bodies. This time the Dragon Mountain split into 2, and suddenly the emperor's palace appeared. This is something extraordinary. Thinking about the girl's words in the Great Dragon Mountain, Ye Fan was almost certain that he was the one who made the split. This could very well mean that he had some influence on the palace's appearance. His thoughts were interrupted by Elder Mao, who turned to Sister Chu and asked her to give the boy the gift already, since it was already late. The girl agreed. After handing Ye Fan the box, Madame Chu said that it contained a storage ring and an elixir that could extend his life for 1,000 years. And in the storage ring, there were several herbs that he could use. Taking the elixir, which was in the form of a ball, into his hand, Ye Fan smiled contentedly and almost hysterically, realizing that his main problem would soon be solved. A system suddenly appeared behind the guy, asking him to be more restrained as a creepy smile appeared on his face. But Ye Fan, smiling stupidly, whispered to the system that it was imagining things. Sister Chu thanked the doctor again and said that she was very glad that he liked her gift. She also noted that Wuxuan did not say that the boy was so young. Smiling, Mrs. Chu added that on top of that, she knew that Ye Fan lived in Tianwu City and was looking for the elixir of longevity. So for the sake of Wuxuan, she decided to take a risk and announce such a reward. But she didn't expect the guy to come. These treasures were prepared as a token of gratitude. In an instant, a whirlpool of books formed around the girl. She said that these were some of her special works, and Ye Fan could take whatever he liked now. The boy stared at the books in front of him. He was surprised by their number and began to study each of them. It didn't take long. The guy quickly pulled out the book he liked and said he would take it. Surprised by the guy's choice, Ms. Chu said that the book he had chosen was a manual on body purification techniques. The girl suggested that Ye Fan think of another book. But Elder Mao interrupted her and said that the boy most likely had a reason for choosing this particular book, so it was better not to insist. Ye Fan knew that Madame Chu was right, and this was not the most useful book to choose, but what he needed most right now was not a cultivation technique, but a stronger body. Madame Chu smiled and said that if Master Ye had decided so, she would give him the book. She also added that they would soon be heading to the Heavenly Moon Palace, and if there was any news about the corpse cult, she would immediately inform Ye Fan, and so they parted ways. After some time, Ye Fan was walking through the city with his friend Lei. They were discussing what had happened. Lei put his hand on his friend's shoulder, telling Ye Fan that he was something special, and planned to treat him to a good meal at the drunken house. The occasion needed to be celebrated. Ye Fan really liked this proposal. While the boys continued to chat, and Ye Fan cheerfully recounted how he had hit the Lord's sister on the forehead, someone mysterious was sneaking behind them, holding a knife with a curved blade in his hand. In an instant, the knife was forcefully sent towards Ye Fan and flew at high speed straight towards his back. Lei noticed this out of the corner of his eye and, like a true warrior, was able to react very quickly. After shouting for Ye Fan to move away, Lei could do nothing for him except shield his friend with his body. The knife hit Lei directly. Turning around and realizing what was happening, Ye Fan watched in horror. He didn't have time to understand what had happened. Lei fell to the ground and sighed heavily. Ye Fan immediately began to walk towards his brother, wanting to understand what had happened to him. Looking at his friend, Ye Fan noticed the blood on his hand and was horrified. He realized that someone was aiming at him. Lei waved off his brother's concerned cries and said it was just a scratch and everything was fine. Ye Fan helped his friend stand up and lean on himself. All this time, a strange man in a black robe was watching them. Ye Fan felt someone's gaze on him and looked up straight at that person. But he was no longer there. Someone in a robe who wanted to kill the guy would disappear among the roofs of the city. The events then moved to the Jin residence, where heated discussions took place. The man in the robe knelt before his lord and said that Ye Fan had indeed not noticed his attack, but the Tianwu city commander standing nearby had reacted almost instantly. Standing next to his father, Mr. Jin exclaimed joyfully upon learning that Ye Fan was indeed a mere mortal. Father Yenerv Jin told him that from his description, after that incident, Ye Fan would be under the protection of the Heavenly Moon Palace, and the Heavenly Moon Palace was an organization that the Jin family could not afford to get involved with. Yener exclaimed, how could they be as close to the Chu family as their family? Moreover, Wu Xuan and Yener were even engaged. Father replied that ever since Chu Wu Yue became a master, the Chu family changed. Therefore, the Jin family must be careful. Enraged, Yeren shouted and asked his father if that was all. His father only replied that his son's irritability and rage prevented him from objectively assessing the situation. Yener even more angry, and he threw his fan with all his might right onto the floor in front of his father's burrows. Turning around, the boy walked quickly and loudly out of the room under the stern but calm gaze of his father and the worshipping servant. Entering his room, Yener began to smash it, throwing and breaking cups. He didn't understand why the head of the Jin family was afraid of a child. He thought his father was just pathetic. Here the doors to the chambers opened and a man entered, who advised Mr. Yan to be more careful in his desires. It was one of Yan Jin's familiar masters. Putting on a sly grin, he continued walking deeper into the room and asked what had made the guy so angry. Jin Yang immediately began to explain his position and fiercely prove his case. The master listened to him attentively. Lost in thought, the master noticed that the city of Tianwu had recently become the talk of the town because of what was happening there. The master said that Yang's father, Jin Jin, is getting older and has become too conservative in recent years. He is sure that everyone understands and feels this. Jinin started talking again, saying that their Jin family was originally a big family on par with the Chu Hezhu family, but it was only because Chu Wu Yue became a master and took a high position, his father grovels before them. Then Yang said that if he were the head of the city, the Jin clan would never stoop to such a low level. These words caused the other person to smile wryly. He said that like his teachers, the masters delight in the ambitions of their student. Then he told Yan to follow him. The teacher folded his hands and began to release energy. Strong and negative, a huge white snake materialized next to him. Seeing this energy, Yang became a little scared and asked the teacher where they were going now. Extending his hand to his disciple, the master said that they would go to a place where they could gain strength. A month later, a small yellow paper crane was spotted at the sword peak in the Heavenly Moon Palace. At this time, elder sister Chu was practicing her sword fighting skills. Here her sword stopped right next to a passing crane. The training had to be interrupted. The girl took the bird in her hands and began to look at it with interest. Here light began to pour out of it. In this world, such a crane was a means of communication, which meant that some information from afar should now emerge. After seeing the contents of the message, the girl clenched her fists and was ready to hit the road. The same yellow crane fell into Ye Fan's hand at almost the same time. The guy looked at him in surprise, wondering why he had come to the clinic. Ling Ling replied that it was a talisman that could be used to communicate from afar. Yifan immediately realized that it looked like a mobile phone, but the girl didn't know what it was, so she was surprised by the guy's statement. Then the crane began to emit light. It seemed as if someone was calling. It was necessary to see what the bird wanted to convey. The crane rose into the air, and a female voice came from it asking for help. Yifen was surprised to hear a painfully familiar voice. It was Madame Chu's voice. At this time, Mr. Jin's teacher gathered many people around him, starting a meeting. His plan was to use Lord Jin to show everyone their strength. Jin Yang himself was only too happy to go against his father and take revenge on the impudent guy who stuck his nose where it didn't belong, and the girl who trusted him. While in the dungeon, Sister Chu continued to attack endlessly while defending herself with her sword. There were countless puppet dolls around her, attacking the girl. They laughed vilely and never stopped, attacking and attacking. This went on for 7 whole days. It seemed to Ms. Chu that these dolls were simply endless. No matter how many she killed, new dolls would fly at her again, clicking their teeth. The girl raised her sword and used a powerful technique called moonlight. She destroyed a huge number of dolls, but it was not enough to destroy them all. The use of technology in the 7-day defense had greatly weakened Chuyue. Her strength was running out. As she sank to the floor, she realized that the invitation from the Jin family a month ago was indeed a conspiracy. That day, she received a message from the Jin family that they were throwing a banquet for her to make up for Jin Yang's rudeness. Madame Chu didn't like banquets, but the Jin family and the Chu family were old friends, so she had to go. Entered the Jin estate, she saw no banquet. She saw nothing and no one at all. Walking up to the table, she picked up a paper cup, surprised to see that it had paper cutlery on it. Then the floor beneath her lit up with a bright purple light. It was a trap. Mrs. Chu realized it, but it was too late. It was a teleporter that took her to a strange dungeon she'd never been to. Then suddenly someone grabbed her by the leg, causing her to scream as it was an unusual hand. Lowering her head, the girl saw a skeleton crawling out from under the ground beneath her, trying to get to her. The next moment, dolls started flying at her from above. Lots of dolls. The situation was creepy and unpleasant. Not long ago, Wuxuan came to Tianwu City. She wanted to seek help from Yefan. Turning to the master, the girl said that she had brought what he had asked for, holding a box in her hands. Thanked Wuxuan and said that she had gotten there quite quickly. Yefan and Wuxuan leaned over the box together, intending to open it and cast the searching spell. But when Yefan opened it and saw the contents, he thought it was a bit too much, since it was Madame Chu's underwear. Almost dying of shame, Sister Wuxuan fell to her knees and said that she was very sorry that she brought this particular thing. But Yefan was not embarrassed and said that with this, they could easily find Master Chu. Almost crying from embarrassment, Wuxuan asked, was there really no other way to find her sister? Yefan knew that there was another way, but if he used this technique, the little annoying system would pierce him with its scythe. Therefore, Yefan said that in any case they would first try this simpler option, spreading Sister Chu's things on the floor and bowing down in front of them. As he had already explained to Wuxuan, the more intimate the clothing, the better one could track Lady Chu's position, since such things retain the most energy of the owner. Placing his hand over the things, Yefan began to perform his searching technique. He succeeded. His energy quickly moved into the forest to one of the local inconspicuous caves. Inside, one could see creepy, toothy dolls that were clearly aggressive. Yefan was taken aback when he saw this. He didn't expect to see such a terrifying sight, but the main thing is that Miss Chu should still be alive. Wuxuan immediately turned to Elder Ye and asked if he had managed to find her sister. But the guy didn't answer. He was trying to figure out what to do next, and at the moment he was very focused. Taking out a map and spreading it out on the table, Yefan said that he felt that Sister Chu should be somewhere in the southwest and pointed to a certain point. It was a valley of poison, a very dangerous place where many dangers could await the guys. But there was no choice. Wuxuan, taking out her sword, said that they had to hurry before it was too late, hugged Wuxuan's shoulders, agreed with her words, and was ready to set off. The embarrassed girl suggested that Yi Fan take them himself. The guy didn't object. With the help of the girl's power, they soared into the air and flew through the night sky with the help of energy towards their target. After landing, Ye Fan said that this place was like a ghost movie. Would they really meet them here? The girl did not answer, and they went forward, unaware that they were being followed from the very beginning. Then literally out of nowhere, a terrible and disgusting laugh was heard. These were dolls. Noticing them first, Yefan shielded Miss Chu, telling her to be careful and prepared to repel the attack. But then, under the power of some light energy, all the dolls soared into the air and dissolved. Someone helped them. Yefan was surprised. Turning around, he saw Mrs. Chu, who, kneeling down from fatigue, asked if the boys were okay. Wuxuan was very happy to see her sister, but her sister turned her attention to Master Ye, asking what he was doing here. Yefan replied that he had received a message from her crane, so he came. But Mrs. Chu suddenly made a puzzled expression and said that she had not sent him anything because it was too dangerous here. This news shocked both Yefan and Wuxuan. They began to realize that this was all a conspiracy, and the puzzle finally began to fit together in their heads. But there was no time to think. The dolls were attacking, so the sisters, having joined forces, began to successfully defend themselves without much effort. Yefan was sitting and examining the dead broken doll, poking it with a stick. An interesting thought began to form in his head. Madame Chu walked up to the guy and said that if she was not mistaken, the puppets were the work of the Jin family. But the girl also feels a very evil energy inside them. This means that someone from the Jin family and some villain were working together. This was the suggestion made by Ye Fan, who said that perhaps the Jin family had allied with someone. It remained to be seen which sect held a grudge against him and Lord Chu. Ms. Chu hadn't thought about it before, but this guess was very close to the truth, and it was shocking. Wuxuan interrupted his thoughts and shouted that a new wave of dolls was approaching. It was like a curse. The dolls kept appearing and advancing. The friends began to defend themselves, still unaware that they were being watched from afar through a small sphere. This was done by a strange man in a robe. Sitting at the head of the table, he told his comrades that he was glad they had finally gathered. There were 7 other people at the table besides him. The girl with a small snake on her hand chuckled and said that she never thought that Chu Wu Yue will fall into their trap so easily. But the guy in the horned mask told this girl, named Mingu, not to take it so lightly. The man at the head of the table said that although they had every chance of winning, they still had to be careful. Sitting opposite him was Mr. Jin. Pointing at him, the hooded man said that if they joined forces, even the great Sun Emperor would not be able to escape, so they could rest easy. Lord Jin replied that it was all thanks to the power and help of the great master. Once the heavenly moon palace was destroyed, the imperial palace would fall under their control. The girl continued speaking. Looking at the 2 men in front of her, she assumed that these elders did not seem to be too happy to cooperate. One of the men exploded and began to complain, saying that this was not so. After all, the elders of the Jing family served the new master, not the old owner. After thinking, the guy in the horned mask told them to prove their loyalty by swallowing the vile creature he created. This seemed like unimaginable ignorance. The elders were afraid and began to say that the corpse cult was in too much of a hurry to waste time on this. But young Master Jin, after thinking about it, said that in his opinion, Elder Ren was right and ordered unverified people to eat the creature. This shocked the elders and they were confused, but there was little choice. They had to stuff the disgusting, slimy creature into themselves and swallow it in order to prove their loyalty to their master in such a stupid way. However, as it turns out, according to Mingu, these parasites in their bodies will eat them from the inside out if they try to throw anything away. Hearing this, the elders panicked, but tried to remain calm. They realized that they were now in a hopeless situation. Teacher Yan, who had been standing behind all this time, declared that if the elders did not accept their fate, the two masters would begin to lose patience. The man in the robe turned to Ren Yi and Mingu and said that he, Elder Yuhua, and Elder Jinming of the Jin clan would be heading to the Miasma Valley. Everyone the leader addressed agreed to carry out the order. At this time, the barrier erected above the Miasma Valley began to crack. Yifan noticed this, but there was no time to discuss it. The dolls stopped attacking for a moment, but skeletons crawled out from under the ground and began to advance straight towards the boys. They were different from what had been before. Suddenly, a loud voice came from above. It said that the Moon Palace Master Chu Wu Yue, the city lord and representative of the noble Chu clan, fell into such a trap. Raising their heads, the friends simultaneously asked who was there and who was speaking. 4 figures appeared in the sky in front of them. They were the people from the corpse cult and the Jin family. Yefan's guess was confirmed. They were now on the same page. The satisfied and arrogant Mingu said that it seemed like they didn't need to do anything. These puppets would sooner or later bite everyone to death. And after that, the girl planned to make them her servants. This thought amused her. The silence that followed was suddenly broken by Yefan, who threw his hand forward and pointed his finger at Mingu. He said that if she had time for empty talk, it would be better for her to think about how she wanted to die. And let her believe it, she really should think about it, because the guy's energy began to grow stronger and stronger. Elder Sister Chu immediately noticed to herself that Ye Fan was even stronger than she thought. Then Elder Ren flew forward and started shouting that this was impossible, and rhetorically asked who Ye Fan even was. But the boy didn't answer. He just gave the order to the sisters to take care of the skeletons while he dealt with the rest. The girls agreed. During this time, their small team, led by Ye Fan, began to act in a coordinated manner. They were ready to repel attacks. Picking up a small twig, Yefan said that he could deal with these enemies in 3 moves. But then, having already directed the branch at the opponents, he changed his mind, saying that 1 would be enough. The elders were shocked by such impudence of the little fool and were already preparing to attack, not seeing a threat in front of them. With loud cries of death, they began to advance at high speed towards Ye Fan, who was already ready to fend off the attacks. The guy stood firmly and confidently. He was not at all afraid of the approaching danger. One of the elders attacked first, but her attacks were too simple and slow for Ye Fan to dodge in time, which is what he did. Ren rushed at him from behind, shouting for the boy to try his sword and test its strength. But Ye Fan, in the next moment, with a slight movement, knocked the sword out of the enemy's hand, shocking him. The guy grinned and asked him where all his self-confidence was now. He then continued to mock the cultists, saying that if they were wondering what a strong master looked like, now they could just look at him. Yefan's sarcasm angered Elder Ren, who shouted curses and furiously attacked the boy. But he was no obstacle for the guy, for whom the enemy turned out to be too slow and predictable. The boy easily intercepted the elder's hand, which held the sword, thus stopping the blow. And the next moment he hit the enemy in the stomach with great force. He screamed in pain and bent in half. After the elder had flown away enough, Yefai raised the branch he had picked up earlier and concentrated his power into it. And then like a sword, he raised it above himself and struck the enemy, as if cutting him into pieces. The elder's thoughts at that moment were that the boy was using a sword technique that he had never understood very easily. The enemy wondered, who exactly was this man? Madame Chu, looking at the rising clouds of dust, noted that Yefan's strength was much greater than her own. This simply couldn't be. This combination of strength and skill seemed unrealistic. At this time, Yefan pushed away another enemy with a strong blow, who left a long mark on the ground and was now almost exhausted. Elder Yuhua noticed that she tried to dodge the attack, but she was slightly hit by the sword chi. However, she suffered severe damage. But compared to her partner Jin Ming, at least she survived. He was within sword range and died instantly. Rising up on her knees, Yuhua said that they couldn't stay here and that they had to run. But 2 swords from the Chu sisters appeared in front of her face, one of which told her not to even think about escaping. The elder sister asked Jin Yuhua, who is behind this? If the woman answers her question, Chu Yue will spare her life, otherwise she will die. But the woman was already covered in sweat from fear. She understood that she could not say, since the poison in her body would kill her. But apparently she didn't even need to answer for the poison to kill her prematurely. Yuhua, with fear and hopelessness in her eyes, began to choke and cough. The poison consumed her, and the woman died in an instant. Looking at this, even Mrs. Chu said that this was too cruel. Still observing the situation through the magic ball, the mysterious cloaked man thought about it, realizing that Yefan was quite the problem. After all, the stranger knew that even with his cultivation level, he couldn't kill a Yuanying stage cultivator so easily. Turning to Master Jin, the mysterious man said that he had indeed made an incredible enemy. The boy then told the master that this Ye Fan had been hiding his true strength and was actually much stronger than anyone expected. The man in the robe replied that in that case, Master Jin needed to break through to the divine transformation stage as soon as possible. As he was leaving, the man advised him to cultivate, absorb beneficial elixirs, and eventually trample Ye Fan under his feet. And the main thing to remember is that all sacrifices will be worth it. Master Jin took this information seriously. While he was thinking, one of the elders addressed the young master, banging his fist on the table. He said that the Jin family's side branches had already been sacrificed. And if they listened to the old master, then there will be no one left in the Jin family. But the boy didn't care. He was sure that if he became a saint, the Jin family would rise in the hierarchy of power. He ordered Elder Jin Nan to prepare the next sacrifice under threat of death. The elder, frightened, could not disagree with this. At this time, Ye Fan and the Chu sisters were flying towards home on magic swords. The elder sister was flying separately, and the boy and Wushuan were flying together as before. Ye Fan examined his data after the battle. The truth was that after using his power, his lifespan had shortened again. But the little demon from Kowloon in the face of the system did not appear and did not even laugh at him. It was strange. Without the system, Ye Fan felt uneasy. But then the guy pulled himself together. Why was he even thinking about it? Was he jitterbug? If the system hadn't appeared, then everything must be fine. Noticing Master Ye's thoughtfulness, Wushuan asked if everything was okay. The boy replied that everything was fine. The older sister, looking at the guy, thought about his character. After all, even with such strength, he does not have such irritating arrogance. Chu Ye looked at her sister and thought that if Wushuan had the opportunity, she could be together with him. Turning towards her, Ye Fan waved to Master Chu and thanked her once again for saving him and helping him. The girl was embarrassed and even blushed a little, but only nodded in response. And then she replied that she was also very grateful to Elder Ye for his help. Then Master Chu thought again. As sword cultivators, they should not have any desires and focus only on their mission. Besides, her sister Wushuan had already become a good friend of Master Ye, and the girl should have been happy for her sister. But she didn't understand why her heart was pounding so much at these thoughts. Was it really a desire to be in her sister's place? It was a difficult question, and now was neither the time nor the place to ponder it. The friends were heading home. At this time, the man in the cloak was sitting in his house, watching a pretty girl helping him with his shoes. Mr. Jin's teacher was standing nearby. The girl held the boot, closed her eyes, and humming some strange melody, which was more like hoarse sounds. Jin's mentor, Deng Feng, how Jin's transformation was going, Yana. He then told my lord that he had sacrificed the entire Jin family as instructed. Therefore, he had most likely already broken through and become a divine transformation stage cultivator. However, it is possible that he had gone mad and transformed, losing all humanity. At this point, a girl spoke up, asking if it would be better if the boy became a mindless beast. The man in the robe just chuckled and said that it was not worth sending Deng Feng to befriend Jin Yang. He had no idea that Jin Yang is so stupid that with just one little trick, he will turn his back on the entire Jin family. It was thanks to this fool that everything went well. The man in the robe smiled mysteriously and maliciously. Now the day when they, the cult members, will be able to control the entire continent is getting closer with every breath. At this time, the Chu and Ye Fan sisters encountered a very eerie place on their way, located deep in the Miasma Valley. Previously, there was a corpse cult here. Now there are only decomposing bodies that emit a not very pleasant smell. The friends moved around with their hands covering their noses. Yifan pointed out that it was no wonder that all the people from the corpse cult had gone crazy living in such a place. There was a crunching sound from the side. Madame Chu immediately became wary and told Elder Ye and Wushuan to beware of ambushes. Looking straight ahead, the friends were horrified. They saw Elder Jin's head in front of them. Wushuan wondered who could have done this. Everyone was wondering about this. But Yi Fan began to realize that it seemed like the corpse cult and the Jin clan had started killing each other. Turning to Elder Yi, Master Chu asked him to check this place using a vision technique that helps to see the past. Summoning the God's Eye technique, Yi Fan began to fulfill Elder Sister Chu's request. At that moment, a strange silhouette, similar to a human, suddenly appeared in front of them. However, his face was distorted and looked creepy. A big smile, revealing fangs, red eyes, and cracked skin. Yi Fan was horrified when he saw this and asked, "What kind of monster is this?" The sisters immediately stepped forward, drawing their swords. The elder sister told Wu Xuan to be careful. When the monster appeared before his friends in full growth, the girls, looking at his hairstyle and clothes, recognized him as Jin Yang. There was no time to think and reflect for long, as the monster Yang pounced on Wu Xuan as if he wanted to tear her apart. But Mrs. Chu immediately appeared in front of her sister, shouting at her to be careful, and took the monster's attack. However, his hand, or rather paw, when it came into contact with Master Chu's sword, did not get cut, but created a strange reaction. A loud sound and bright light erupted all around, causing me to even cover my eyes. After the attack, the girl looked at her weapon and was horrified. The monster was able to break her sword with one blow. But he had no intention of stopping, and making some kind of disgusting loud sound, he pounced on the girl again. But then Ye Fan intervened, telling the monster to close its mouth and kicking it right in the jaw. However, he only flew away, apparently without even feeling pain, and again roared in a nasty voice. Ye Fan was surprised by this outcome after all. He had just kicked Jin Yan with the strength of a Yuanying peak cultivator. From this, he should already be dead. And there wasn't even a scratch on him. He stood up on all fours and, like an animal, began to pounce on his victims. It was heading straight for Master Chu. Seeing this, Yefan asked her to hold off the monster as he had an idea. The guy used the Eye of God insight technique because he wanted to see the soul of his opponent. But when he looked at Jin Yang, he couldn't see any soul in him. He was like a puppet that had lost consciousness and was simply following orders. It was just unclear how he could become like this. Approaching and charging at the boy again, Jin Yang, or rather, the monster, let out another loud noise. Yifan didn't like that scream. Then the boy used his power to create magical big ropes and said that the rowdy boys needed a strong rope from which they would not be able to escape. And during the next attack, Ye Fan sent energy at the monster, which was immobilized by magic ropes the next moment. After finishing his attack, Ye Fan told Master Chu that Jin Yan's current state and cultivation level were very strange and asked how this was possible. The girl replied that she unfortunately didn't know the answer and added that they could take Jin Yang away. The master of their heavenly moon palace should know what was going on. Turning to Wushun, the elder sister suggested that they tie up the enemy and return home, but there was no response. Then turning to look at her sister, Master Chu was horrified to see her. Wushuang's eyes were similar to Jin Yang's, the same black with red pupils inside. Her face no longer showed any emotion. Behind the girl stood a woman whose energy was directed at Wushuang. The woman said that there would be a beautiful scene when the sisters began to fight each other. Looking at this strange person, Ye Fan was horrified to see what she had done to Wushuang and asked who she was. But the woman did not answer him, but only continued to envelop the girl with her charms. She really wanted to turn the sisters against each other. Clutching her broken sword in her fist, Master Chu recognized the woman. She was a priestess of the corpse cult. The girl furiously rushed towards the enemy and ordered the priestess to let her sister go. But the woman chuckled and said that she didn't like ordinary sword fights. At that very moment, dark energy began to thicken around her. This energy was directed towards the elder sister and Ye Fan, accompanied by the words of the priestess who welcomed the little mice into her domain. The next moment, they were transported to a huge complex. Standing right in front of the gate, the friends tried to figure out where they were. Realizing that this was another trap, Ye Fan realized that they were most likely in the corpse cult's lair. The guy's assumption was confirmed when the friends raised their heads and saw the elders of the corpse cult and their mysterious leader in a black robe. Here the leader spoke up, asking if his dear guests were satisfied with his hospitality. But Lady Zhu would not listen to her master any further. Raising her broken sword at him, she ordered him to return Wushuan to her, and then the Moon Palace would spare them all. But the cult leader chuckled and told Mrs. Chu that these were too big words for her. Before threatening him, the girl should better look at her situation. With one raised hand, the leader sent all the servants standing next to him, except for the priestess, into attack. The leader ordered his subordinates to kill both the girl and Ye Fan, and they were already approaching to attack. Walking up to Sister Chu, Ye Fan supported her, put his hand on her shoulder, and said that he would help her deal with them. The girl was a little surprised when Ye Fan took her hand, which held her broken sword. And then, snatching it from Sister Chu's hands, the guy pointed it at the approaching enemies and said that he would deal with them himself. To him, they were becoming more and more like gnats. Ye Fan recreated Chu Yue's sword with his power and was ready to fight. It didn't take much strength to defeat several corpse cult opponents with one blow. They were like pawns on a chessboard. The enemies quickly faded away, and the crowd began to discuss Ye Fan. Someone called him a monster, but one thing was clear, they could not defeat him. Looking at the mood of the cult members, the priestess thought for a moment, then smiled and decided that she should help them. After releasing her energy into each of the cult members who were fighting Ye Fan, she ordered her servants to move forward. The people immediately lost their human appearance and looked more like zombies with red eyes and terrible screams. But this didn't frighten Ye Fan either. He told them to get out of the way and continued to move forward, cutting everyone with Sister Chu's sword. Breaking through the crowd of the priestess's servants, Ye Fan began to fly straight towards her, but the girl, standing on the roof, did not even move. Ye Fan aimed his sword at her, but instead of piercing her, it seemed to pass by and cut through the air. Turning to the surprised guy, the priestess said in a calm voice that he would never be able to catch her, but she could easily hurt Ye Fan. The guy already had a small cut on his cheek, but he didn't care about it now. The guy realized that this was a dud. The priestess really didn't have a body. She was like a hologram, returning to her previous state after the blow. If she didn't have a body, then she was practicing some special technique. At this point, Madame Chu, who realized what was going on, shouted to Ye Fan that this priestess was a soul cultivator. Only a soul cultivator can separate the soul from the body. The girl stood on the ground, shouting at Elder Ye to find her main body. Looking at the girl, the priestess said in a slightly surprised voice that this mouse even had some skills and knowledge. Wuxuan to her and said that Sister Chu had spoken the truth and that her soul was indeed attached to her body. But would Madame Chu or anyone else be able to kill this body, since it was Wuxuan's own body? The younger sister, or rather her body, as if waking up, jumped down to Lady Chu, intending to fight her. The priestess only told Chu Yue with interest to kill her sister. Seeing the situation from below, Ye Fan shouted at Madame Chu to be careful and was about to fly over to help her. But his hand was instantly enveloped in some kind of chain, restraining his movements. At this moment, Ye Fan pulled the chain towards himself to see who its owner was, but it was a small distraction. The cult leader's blade was flying towards the boy from above, but Ye Fan managed to react and raised his sword up to repel the attack. Two large forces caused a powerful explosion that raised clouds of dust. Then the cult leader's voice came from the darkness, telling Ye Fan not to pretend to be weak, but urging him to use his own strength. Ye Fan became angry and asked his enemy if he really thought he was just a big cat and not a tiger. Raising his hand with the blade, the cult leader, his eyes glowing from under his dark hood, replied that he was just about to find out, so the boy shouldn't disappoint him. At this time, the long-awaited battle between the two sisters began below. Lady Chu could not hit Wuxuan. After some time, the priestess said that it was time for her to fight back. Yu thought to herself that the soul of the demon approaching her was actually attached to Wuxuan. Master Chu was already worried about her sister, and now she was also injured as a result of the attack. The girl knew that she would not be able to hold out for long. But the next attack from Wuxuan, and accordingly the priestess, did not take long to come and caused great damage to Lady Chu. After flying a few meters away, Chu Yue slowed down and, falling to one knee, leaned on her sword, trying to stand up. Putting her sword to the girl's neck, the priestess said that her beautiful journey in this world would end in this place. Standing behind the detached Wuxuan, the priestess whispered to the girl and urged her to finally kill her sister. But then the corners of Elder Sister Chu's lips curled up, and she said that she had finally caught the priestess. A circle of light began to form around the girls, restricting the priestess's actions. Chu Yue asked her opponent what it was like to fall into her own trap. It dawned on the priestess that Chu Wu Yue hid her true power and then used herself to lure her into a trap. The priestess was surprised and even a little scared. Here is Chu Wu Yue said that it would be a good idea to take her with them before they died, and then sent the priestess very far away, breaking the ground beneath their feet with her power. The cracks began to turn into debris and fall. The priestess was very scared and had no choice but to retreat. Wu Shuang's body, she said that Chu Wu Yue is simply crazy to do such a thing. But that was not all. The elder sister realized that the priestess intended to simply leave Wuxuan's body and run away, but the girl did not want to let her go. With one blow of her sword, she pierced the real body of the priestess, who let out her last scream and then a sigh. Tired and exhausted, Chu Yue was glad that she had avenged her sister and was able to defeat the enemy. But this did not change the fact that the two sisters and the already lifeless body of the priestess were falling downwards at great speed. At this time, Ye Fan heard a strange noise and paused his fight for a moment to listen. But the cult leader immediately pounced on him and made a good attack, which Ye Fan was still able to repel. Pointing his sword at the boy, the man in the cloak asked contemptuously, "How dare Ye Fan be distracted from their fight? This duel is only between him and Ye Fan." The battle between Ye Fan and the cult leader continued. They were worthy opponents. Neither one wanted to give in. But Ye Fan knew that if the fight dragged on, he would waste too much life energy and lose. Looking at his parameters, Ye Fan was surprised at how quickly his life was draining away. The lifespan that the boy had saved up with such diligence would soon disappear again. It was as if the stupid system wanted to kill him again. Here came the system itself, which told its stupid owner that it was here to help him. Their system offers excellent credit conditions. You can take a little life now and return several times more a little later. Yifan got angry, asking, "Where is their pity? He was a draft horse before he came to this world. He worked like a dog here and finally got a system. So why should he shed blood and sweat again?" But the system only asked if the owner agreed to its proposal, and it was necessary to answer quickly, since the enemy was already right under its nose. The guy sadly told the system, calling it Juju, that if he had a choice, he would choose another system, and agreed to the system's offer. He continued to fight the cult leader, over and over, blow after blow. It was all starting to wear him down. Having parried the blow once more, the guy said that was enough and it was time to finish. By opening the panel, the guy activated a function similar to a loan and received a lot of lifetime. At that moment, his strength level instantly increased. He felt like he could now use it much more and become stronger. Yifan said that there were not many who could withstand his blow, and his opponent was one of them. Let's see if he could withstand one of his blows. But the enemy did not listen to Yifan, believing that he was too conceited, and attacked with renewed vigor. Both opponents put all their strength into this blow. It was a junction of two very different energies, pure and dark. But Yifan was able to break through the energy barrier without much effort and push the enemy back with his momentum. The light energy was stronger. But Yifan did not let the enemy fall. After asking where he was rushing to, the boy rushed towards the enemy. Before he could even touch the ground, Yifan dealt him another powerful blow that was impossible to dodge. After the opponent fell, Yifan stepped on his chest, pressing him to the ground, and asked how his fist was. But instead of shouting or insulting, the guy laughed loudly and said that he hadn't felt such power for a long time. In 2,000 years, he had only seen two pairs of such eyes. One is Yifan's, and the other is the immortal emperor. This news stunned Yifan. He did not expect such a comparison. The guy recoiled, saying that his defeated enemy was talking nonsense, and asked who he was anyway. While Yifan was trying to recover from what he had heard, the opponent took advantage of this moment and hit the guy with his energy, but he managed to jump back. The guy in the cloak used his energy to pull a random, screaming person towards him in order to take his life force and restore himself. He grabbed the man by the throat and smirked as he began his ritual. It was noticeable how the man's vitality was leaving him, his skin was becoming flabby, and his eyes were growing dull. After finishing his ritual, the boy threw away the body that had fallen dead and smiled contentedly as he stood in front of Yifan. Yifan's disapproving and anxious gaze amused his enemy. He asked the boy why he was looking at him like that, since they were actually the same. With his eyes closed, Yifan was unable to understand what his opponent was talking about or what he meant. This confusion of the guy was enough for the man in the hood to pounce on him again, wanting to attack. At this time, Madame Shuye began to regain consciousness. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Wuxuan calling her. Hanging on a sword stuck in a hole in the stone wall, holding her hand in the air, Chuya thought she had died, but Wuxuan convinced her otherwise and was very happy when her sister woke up. Now they could get out. Wuxuan said that after the Simeng left her body, she came to her senses and then stabbed the sword into the wall. Chuya was glad that her sister was okay. Having already climbed to the top, the sisters heard a strange noise at the bottom of the cliff and decided to look and find out what was happening. In the end, it turned out that the priestess, having left the body of Wuxuan, used the technique of eternal sleep and did not die. Her body was enveloped and carried by white butterflies. As soon as the girls descended towards Shimeng, her body suddenly soared into the air and flew away, as Chu Yue guessed, towards Elder Ye. The sisters knew they couldn't do it alone. Chuya then decided to send a crane to summon the sectmaster. Now they could only hope he would arrive soon. When Madame Chu let go of the crane, she only wanted them to prevent anything from happening to Master Ye. But Ye Fan was still able to cope on his own. After repelling the enemy's attack once again, he advanced on the cult leader who had fallen to the ground. He smiled and said that Ye Fan was indeed good and looked very much like the missing emperor. He's just like the man the hooded guy fought 1,000 years ago, like the heavenly emperor himself. But it would be foolish to think that the guy hadn't gotten better in 1,000 years. Rising from his knees, he was preparing to attack again. Then white butterflies began to appear around Ye Fan one by one. There were more and more of them. The boy did not understand what was happening. Then the white butterflies, from which a red glow emanated, dispersed in front of the head of the corpse cult, and from them emerged the figure of a priestess. She greeted her master. Meng's cheek ordered her to give him everything she had. Shimeng agreed and closed her eyes as the guy sucked out her life force and magic, just like he had done to an ordinary person a few minutes ago. Jimeng's last words were to ask him to destroy the world for her sake. The cult leader accepted her power. Butterflies began to circle around him, covering his body like a cocoon. And a second later, the guy in the hood seemed to be reborn and jumped up, flapping 3 pairs of wings. Yifan was horrified when he saw this and thought that this boss was actually a level 2 boss. At this point, a system appeared behind Yifan. It lightly mocked the owner, saying that he was sweating like a pig. Seeing Juju, Yifan was surprised. But then, almost with tears in his eyes, he turned to the system and asked it to help him. The system thought about it. How could she help him if his enemy had absorbed many lives, but had not yet fully transformed? So the longer they waited, the stronger he became. The system advised to simply prevent the guy's enemy from fully transforming, push him there or something, and began to disappear. Yifan did not like this advice. Is this really all the system can offer him? After all the other systems help their carriers, but not this one. Why couldn't she, for example, give him the power of infinite cultivation in the form of a golden finger so that Yifan could blow the enemy to smithereens? But it was too late to talk to a system that the enemy hadn't even noticed, as it was time for a new attack. Already irritated by the conversation with the system, Yifan turned his head and saw the winged monster approaching him, making him even more angry. At that moment, the monster had already become too annoying for the guy, so he turned around and swung at it with all his might. But the monster withstood Yifan's attack, seemingly with ease, and was able to extinguish his energy. The monster grinned and asked why the guy was so weak. Had he really not eaten at all today? To Yifan, this was unexpected and astonishing. The enemy's strength had increased very significantly. Where did that immortal dragon's power go? The enemy told Yifan to try harder, but the guy's power hasn't left a scratch on him yet. Then the monster hit Yifan with all his might, sending him flying back several meters. Due to inertia, the guy landed on his back on the ground and received a strong blow. As Yifan stood up, he heard mockery directed at him, saying that it would be a disappointment if this was all he could do. Quickly getting up from the ground, Yifan twisted and flexed his fist, saying that it looked like he had to get serious after all. The guy jumped up in a second, and in the blink of an eye found himself next to his opponent, which shocked him. Literally flying past the monster like a bullet, Yifan grabbed onto its lower wing. And then with a strong swing, he pulled it towards himself, and with a throw, slammed the monster straight into the ground. Having already fallen, the monster began to wonder what kind of nonsense this was, and where the guy was constantly getting this strength from. But Yifan, standing over his opponent for the umpteenth time, told him that he was underestimating him too much and was about to use force. But then something started to glow from above. Raising his head, Yifan noticed clots of energy from the outside, which the monster was releasing from its mouth. The dark energy clot falling on Yifan was the monster's last chance to save him. But the guy broke it by simply raising his fist up and crushing the energy. And the next fist flew as a blow straight into the monster's face so that it would finally weaken. Looming over his hard-fought enemy, the boy asked him about his last words. But the monster decided to ask the guy if he really didn't want to know the secrets that he knew, and offered a deal. If Yifan left him alive, he would tell him many truths of this world. But Yifan interrupted the boy's monologue, asking if he had said everything. He really didn't want to listen to the nasty and annoying monster right now. With one movement of his hand, the guy destroyed the monster forever, thinking that it made no difference to him whether he learned these truths or not. He already has plenty of time to find everything himself. The next second, Yifan soared into the air above the dead body. Having gathered all the evil emotions of the recent time, the guy said that this monster and his cult will now burn in fire. Ling Ling, Master Wang, Tianwu City, and the thousands of innocent people who suffered at the hands of the cult caused a storm of emotions to flow into energy in the boy. The guy used divine fire to burn everything here to the ground, leaving behind only clouds of ash and smoke. Later, having already moved away from the place of the struggle, he was childishly delighted at his great victory over the cult. But behind the stone all this time sat one surviving member of the corpse cult, Jin Yang's mentor, trying not to make a sound. The sisters came out to meet Master Yi. Wuxuan supported Yao Yue helped her walk, but they were alive. Yifan was very glad that they were okay. Hearing the rustling of the grass, Yifan, who said that he didn't think the sisters would survive, realized that there was someone there. Directing his power towards the sound, Yifan shouted at the coward to come out. The boy's strength pulled the enemy out from under his cover, and he flew out of it, falling onto the grass. Standing over the frightened man, Yifan, still threatening him with his strength, asked him, "Who is he?" The sisters themselves recognized him as Jin Yang's mentor, Dan Feng. He was frightened and could not utter a word. Dan Feng thought to himself that if they suddenly found out that he was from the sect, he would die just as badly as Wu Ji, so he randomly scrolled through the words in his head. Falling to his knees in front of Ye Fan, Dan Feng asked for help. Since his father is a gambler, he has a sick mother, a schoolgirl sister, a single-parent family, a crazy sect leader. It's all not his fault. It's just how life turned out. Yafan looked at the man in surprise and stopped his flow of words, saying that it was as if he was taking an exam and had not prepared at all. But Yafan offered Dan Feng that if he told him about Wu Ji's past and the immortal emperor, he would spare the man's life. Dan Feng began the story. Wu Ji had a man who followed the emperor when he was still alive, and it was rumored that the emperor had a mysterious technique that allowed him to sacrifice his life to gain great power. Based on this, Wu Ji learned the voodoo mystery and founded the corpse cult. Yifan thought that this description was so similar to the power that the system gave him. Could they be related somehow? As soon as the guy thought about the system, it pulled him out of reality again and put its scythe to the owner's neck, asking if he had forgotten anything. Yifan also asked Lord Chu if she had any life-extending pills, but the girl replied that she had already given all her supplies to Elder Yi. But then Madame Chu pointed at Dan Feng and said that he definitely had something similar. Yi Ban and the system that no one saw immediately began to literally eat the frightened man sitting in front of him with their selfish gazes. He covered himself with his hands out of fear and asked what they were going to do to him. After undressing the man, Ye Fan was pleased to find that he had some very good and expensive pills, while Dan Feng whined and said that he was innocent. Taking out one pill from the jar, Ye Fan decided to try it and see what effect it had. After eating the pill, Ye Fan felt a surge of strength spread throughout his entire body. But after checking the parameters, the guy saw that his life expectancy was 203 years. This was terrifying. It turns out that one such pill that he ate adds only 1 year to his life. But that's not a problem because there were still a lot of them. So it was necessary to take quantity. An hour later, everyone looked with surprised eyes at the heavily overfed guy with a full belly who could barely move. At this point, Chu Yui's sister suggested that Ye Fan go with them to the Heavenly Moon Palace. She would report to the palace master and ask him to use the secret treasure that extended life as a gift for saving her. Hearing this, Ye Fan was very inspired and ran to Lady Chu and said that since the corpse cult sect had been destroyed, they could hurry up and return quickly. But then a voice came from above, saying that there was no need to hurry because he was already here to take them. Looking up, everyone saw a huge flying ship. It was piloted by Elder Mao, who had jumped off the plane and had received a message from Madame Chu and had come to pick her up. Elder Mao replied that it was not only him, but also the elder of their sect, so let everyone quickly climb on board. Dan Feng thought that this was a great chance to escape, and he stood up from his knees and began to run away from the scene as quickly as possible. But Elder Mao's gaze quickly shifted to the retreating figure, which the boy recognized as one of the thieves who had once stolen his uniforms. How many years? How many winters? The elder was glad to catch him with his energy ropes, which enveloped the fugitive on the move. Dan Feng fell down and screamed for help, almost crying. But Elder Mao did not want to let him go, and only jokingly expressed a desire to talk. In the meantime, Xiao Mao turned to Yefa and said that the master of the Heavenly Moon Palace invited him to meet. The boy agreed. When everyone had boarded, the ship rose and began to sail among the clouds as if on water. Walking on the deck, Yifan asked Madame Chu, who was the Moon Palace master that Xiao Mao spoke of? Master Chu replied that if one disregards the elders, their palace master is the best in Heizhou. After the fall of the immortal emperor, the continent plunged into endless wars, and the then palace master and the top master stopped them and restored order. The Heavenly Moon Palace is the #1 sect in Heizhou, and the palace master is naturally a very powerful person. Yifan was surprised, but there was no time to ask further questions as they finally reached the room they needed and entered it. The man sitting in front of them was waiting for them. Lowering his dark glasses, he introduced himself as Wu Tian. He told Yifan to come in and sit down. He didn't look very presentable. Therefore, Ye Fan was very surprised when he saw him. This was not what he had imagined the best in Heizhou to be. Leaning towards the guy, Wu Tian told him that he was a good candidate for immortality. Then, smiling, he offered to buy his book. Ye Fan was taken aback. Ye Fan leaned over to Sister Chu and whispered to her if it was really him, the great talent and leader of the strongest sect, but she only coughed. Here Wu Tian changed his tone and asked mysteriously, perhaps the guy needed the immortal branch of Kunlun. The two Chu sisters exclaimed in surprise, saying that this was one of the greatest treasures in their palace. But Ye Fan only thought about it, and especially the word greatest. But Wu Tian explained that this was a heavenly treasure, the Kunlun Immortality Branch, a divine artifact of heaven, a wooden astrolabe, and a mysterious fragment of the heavenly moon. Thousands of years ago, after the fall of the immortals, four like-minded people decided to stop the war for the sake of people. One of them was good with a sword, another with an axe, the third with prophecy, the fourth with healing. The four of them went through great difficulties and dangers. They were considered the strongest of the strongest. Eventually, they managed to obtain 3 relics of Emperor Xian, which possessed enormous power. And the 4 warriors finally got what they wanted, the Heavenly Palace. They became the origin of this great sect. Wu's story, Tian asked Ye Fan, after listening to this story, did he become particularly fond and enchanted by the Heavenly Palace? Ye Fan replied that Lord Chu had already invited him to go to the Heavenly Palace with her before, thus showing that he did not attach much importance to Wu Tian's words. But he smiled, replied that everything was fine, and waving goodbye since it was already late, left the room. Ye Fan walked out onto the deck with his sisters and thought about what was happening at the moment. The guy compared the palace of the celestial moon to the moon broken in the water. But when they reached the palace of the heavenly moon itself, its charm and grandeur began to manifest in a maze. Looking at it, Yafan called the palace grand and added that it was the largest clan in Hezhou. Xiao Mao smiled and confirmed his words. After getting off the ship, the friends headed towards the entrance of the palace. Here, Xiao Mao quickened his pace and ran towards the girl named Gixi. The girl was incredibly beautiful features and long red hair. Only the strange bandage on her eyes did not allow her to be fully appreciated. But even so, Ye Fan was amazed by her, thinking that she was a fairy. The girl approached the guy and asked if he was the same Ye Fan. The guy extended his hand to greet her and confirm her words. But the girl immediately grabbed his wrist and joyfully pressed it to her chest, saying that she was very glad that she had finally met him. Not only Ye Fan, but also the Chu sisters standing nearby were taken aback by such negligence and open behavior. Shuya asked Guichi why she was here. She always stayed in the Star Pavilion. Did she really come out specifically to greet them? Guichi replied that the palace of the immortal emperor had appeared in the world, and the master had sent masters and top disciples to find it. There were not many people left, including the master, herself, and Mao, who could not help much in the battle. After finishing, she immediately turned around, grabbed Ye Fan's hand, pulling the guy along with her and saying that she would leave for a moment, as she needed to tell the guy something in private. Looking after Guishi, Xiao Mao replied with suspicion that the girl usually did not behave like this. Chu Wuyue confirmed the elder's words, saying that something was wrong. But Gishi had already led Ye Fan into the room, saying that they were in the guest room of the Star Pavilion. It was a bit simple, but she hoped that Ye Fan wouldn't mind. At this point, Ye Fan suddenly pulled his hand back, freeing it from the girl's hand, and seriously turned to Madame Gishi, asking what she wanted. Turning to the guy, Gixi uttered the word prophecy, which she believes in and considers her future. So Guishi told Mr. Ye Fan that he was the chosen one of heaven, and now she would help him on his path. Ye Fan was very surprised by these words, asking what other heavens she meant. But Guishi didn't respond, and simply turned around and headed towards the exit, which made Ye Fan even more confused. Already boiling, Ye Fan thought irritably that it would be good if the girl at least finished her sentence, and people like Guishi, with their cockroaches in their heads, really irritated him. Here the guy decided to call out the presence of the system and began to turn his head, calling out to Juju. The system immediately appeared nearby and asked what the owner needed. Ye Fan asked her about Gishi's words. Perhaps the system knew something, but Juju told Ye Fan not to think about it. And anyway, it would be better for them to leave tomorrow. This place is hers for them, and that's all she can suggest now. But Ye Fan must trust the system because it will never harm him. Ye Fan wanted to object, but after realizing the seriousness of the system, he agreed. After some time, Ye Fan and Wu the Tian decided to take a break, go to some entertainment venue and celebrate the victory over the cult and the guy's arrival to visit. Sitting at a table in front of beautiful dancers, Wu Tian kept urging the guy to drink more and more with him. Ye Fan didn't refuse, thinking that it really wouldn't hurt him, taking another glass and pouring the contents into his mouth. Here, Wu Tianyu's worried servant ran up to him and began whispering something about bloody flowers to the palace master and asking for advice on what to do. Ye Fan became wary. Wu Tian's face became more serious for a moment, but then he suddenly stood up and, telling Master Ye that he had drunk too much, left the establishment. Wu's behavior, Tiana. He immediately remembered the system's words that this was not the place where he should be and show his strength. Turning towards the stage, Yifanya thought that he had helped the Heavenly Moon Palace many times before and had definitely done his part. Although Juju likes to tease his master, he believes her words. Yifan has decided to return home tomorrow as soon as he receives the life-extending pill. As Yifan left the establishment, he couldn't understand what exactly the palace's inhabitants were hiding and what Guichi wanted to help him with. Then a familiar voice was heard from behind Yifan, saying that this was not a labyrinth palace. The boy turned around, wanting to know who it was, and recognized Mao's silhouette. He was alert and focused, heading towards the boy. In the morning, Yifan went out to look for the master of the Heavenly Moon Palace, as he was nowhere to be found. Here he noticed men talking to each other, talking about another death. There was anxiety and fear in their voices. Yifan walked up to one of the guys and touched his shoulder, asking him what was going on. The boy replied that there had been another death, one yesterday evening, and this morning, they said, one of the older students had died. Yifan said that he was looking for Master Wu and asked if he was here. The other guy recognized the guest as Master Wu and decided to take the guy to him. Wu should be Tian. He faced a huge crowd in front of him. Yifan began to push people aside and approach the scene of the incident. Pushing his way closer, Yifan caught many surprised and displeased glances, but he still reached his destination. Yifan saw a dead man below, who looked creepy as tree branches with maroon leaves were growing out of his mouth and ears. Standing over Wu's corpse, Tian, looking at this horror, said that this was already the 9th case in all this time.